by Tom Sherwood, and I will turn the time over to.
Hi. So, I think it was sometime in April. I think I shared with the board some PLC data from Brighton. They had actually started implementation of a self-evaluation tool where the PLCs would get together and kind of evaluate themselves on where they were in different aspects of the PLC process, where they had strengths, where they had weaknesses. And Brighton's actually been tracking this since spring of 24, excuse me. And I shared it with the board just as a, hey, look at this. And you guys said, hey, why don't we have everybody do this? And I think it was a good idea. So in the first iteration of the self-assessment, we had varying degrees of participation by the different 5 traditional high schools. Alta, Jordan, and Corner Canyon all used the digital tool that we sent them. And Brenda from Hillcrest just didn't see the digital one. And she sent it on paper and compiled all the data on her own. But the benefit of the data that I've shared with you is it gives the principals and the administration at those schools an opportunity to see where their strengths are, where their weaknesses lie, and how to focus their PLC efforts in helping them move their PLCs forward. High schools are definitely the most challenging arena for professional learning communities, simply because so many teachers teach so many varied subjects. It's hard to get into one box and stay there. And another issue is we have about 25% of the faculties of high schools are the only person in the building that teaches that subject. And so one of the things, one of the benefits of having the Fridays is we allow for that cross-pollination between our high schools, where, you know, choir teachers get together, woodshop teachers, or, you know, all those different singletons are able to collaborate and talk about best practices. And I don't know if you had a chance to look through this. I really liked the free response at the end of the surveys from Corner, Jordan, and Alta. As a principal, I think those would be my first place I would look to seeing how I could get the most bang for my buck in helping my teachers to find more resources and success in their professional learning community. Do you have any questions for me?
Karen.
My question is, a number of the responses in all of the schools said they didn't have enough time. What do you account? What does that involve? I realize that's a big title for a lot of things.
You know, it's I don't want to speculate too much, but I do think that sometimes, especially in education, but I think in a lot of arenas, we try to do everything all at once. So for example, we may go to our math department and say, hey, we want you to use all of your common assessments, sit down and review those common and formative assessments and discuss how you can, you know, do better teaching these concepts moving forward. And the math teachers would say, we don't have common assessments. We haven't sat down and even developed our common assessments yet. And so they're like, well, when are we going to have the time to develop our assessments if we're supposed to be talking about curriculum and whether or not the students are learning the curriculum we already have? When are we going to build the assessments? And I think some of it is making teachers feel like all of it is part of the PLC process. As a principal, I would be 100% fine with them using a big chunk of that PLC time to develop those assessments and to refine those assessments. And then, you know, even if they are just reviewing data once in a while and they're spending a lot of their time reviewing the assessments, making the assessments, it would be a worthwhile effort. So I just think there's so many aspects of creating effective professional learning communities that they just feel overwhelmed sometimes about.
We got that impression from
about getting it all accomplished in, you know, a couple of hours in an afternoon on a Friday. And I think a lot of them are tempted to use the time for other things, which is also a challenge, you know, whether it's grading or getting ready for Monday or
planning periods.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree.
I'm just going
no, they do.
It's for that.
No, they definitely do. And I think the principal's doing a good job of helping their teachers focus on the PLCs. We have a lot of schools going to conferences this summer. And I know sometimes those seem like pretty good chunk of money to invest, but
Very valuable.
they are very valuable. It really helps teachers to learn more about the process and to get on the same page and develop camaraderie. And I can tell you, it was one of the most valuable things I did as a principal, was taking advantage of the learning tree conferences. So solution tree.
Okay, so I'm the one who asked for this, because how many years are we into doing PLCs at the high school now?
So ours full second.
It's the end of the second year. Okay, which is helpful to consider in context. I wish we could have seen an overall summary comparing apples to apples. This was a little bit hard to be able to synthesize the information. And so my wish would be that, in the future, like we could have something like that, but it shows what's happening in the district overall. And also perhaps having communications help ferret out some of the comments, kind of like they do when we get like surveys from parents. It seems like there's a wide variation of faculty that are responding at the different high schools. Like I can't tell how many at Hillcrest responded because she doesn't have it listed. Okay.
Kirsten, couldn't we run the same analytics like we do on superintendent listening tour on this? And that would.
So
Yes, I
Same.
remember.
But having it, I agree, because it was
It's
like,
really-
they were all 5 reported very differently, and having a common self-evaluation, so the data all comes in,
Right.
so it's comparable.
Right. I mean, I'll be honest, as a board member, I was part of the board that approved PLCs, and there was some public pushback about how much school time, that was impacting for kids, and also it changed the things that the middle schools were doing, and a lot of the middle school communities were upset about that. So I think it's, and well, the Alta community, so that's my high school, they really were upset about the fact that they lost out on their late start Tuesday.
They had their own, right?
Yeah, they had their own, and it was working really well. And so there's this part of me that's like, okay, if we're gonna do this, we need to make sure it's really working. Like, so when I look at this, I'm curious, when we do kind of the data analytics, I'd love to see what percentage of faculty are filling this out in each of the high schools. And it seems like there is a common theme, though, that their short-term and long-term goals are really weak. Like compared to what they could be, like that's one of their weaker areas, and that professional learning is also not strong. A lot of the teachers talked about how much they wish they had more support from the district or had more professional learning opportunities to understand what a PLC should look like. The part that concerned me the most, and this is a little bit part of why I wanted to see what was going on, is that one of their weakest areas is using student data to really inform what they're doing. In my mind, part of why we have PLCs is to be able to figure out how to personalize learning for kids, or understand, not let them fall through the cracks. I mean, Rick and I had this conversation after Entrada's graduation the other night, where a lot of the kids end up there in part because they just fell through the cracks somewhere. And in my mind, if we're spending the time and resources for PLCs, that shouldn't be happening as much. And so when there is a significant enough gap where that's not being addressed, I'm wondering, are we really getting it? And what do we need to do to fix that, to make sure? I thought it was shocking that some teachers said that there's a perception that PLCs are not required for everyone. And I'm like, what's happening there? And also, like, this is another thing I care a lot about, is making sure that we're using leader exemplary teachers to train other teachers, like that we're using our stars. And I've been told many times, and I believe it, that it exists, but I'm trying to figure out what can, like, the culture exists that teachers in high school really like their own kingdom. They don't like to necessarily collaborate with other teachers. They don't like to necessarily say, like, have someone hold up an example and say, here's something you should change. But at some level as a district, we've got to figure out, like, how can we make a difference in that cultural mindset? Especially if we're going to hold on to PLCs. And let's see, what are the other things? And I'm also wondering what we can do to provide them better support from the district level, as it seemed like that was a very common theme. One of the other things that was said is that it sounds like for the singletons, one of the complaints is that principals are not only on the, not always on the same page, and so it becomes difficult for some of them to collaborate with each other, which again, that doesn't make sense to me, like there's gotta be a way to address that. And then the vertical alignment piece, this is the other reason why as a board member, I was excited about the idea of PLCs. We've got to figure out how to better vertically align. I mean, and it's not just elementary to middle and middle to high school. Like I'm finding like as a parent, even sometimes the vertical alignment between a 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade programs are not always as smooth as you would expect they would be. And so I don't know, as a board member, not only would I love to see the data in a way that's a little bit more digestible or understandable and what it is we're looking at, and because I think we need to talk as a board about like what is it we need to do to make sure that these are really functioning the way that they need to, the way we promised the public they would.
So, we didn't write the survey for you.
No.
I mean, that, I'm not trying to be like, you know.
No, it's okay.
It was done for the PLC teams to get together and to self-evaluate, say, hey, how are we doing? Where can we improve? And these were really supposed to be used at the school level. And this was really kind of developed at one school in particular. And you're like, hey, do we have any evidence of where, you know, how our PLC is doing? I said, well, I have this school that has some evidence. And then I didn't really send it to the schools until late April, early May. And by then it was really late in the game for them to even try to get it out and have everybody do it. Ideally, it should have been done collaboratively with the PLC teams talking together. How are we doing on this? How can we do better? And the schools that did it was done independently. So it was really done trying to check a box, you know, and I feel like, but the information the principals got back was beneficial. I thought like, yeah, this is something we want to do. This is something we want to use moving forward. And I think the idea of PLCs is self-evident to me. As a teacher over, you know, it's been almost 25 years now since I left the classroom, but we did this without being encouraged. You know, we got together as teachers. Hey, how are you teaching this? You know, what do you do that I'm not doing? What were your test scores like? We gave the same test without being forced to. It was just, we just arrived there on our own. And one of the things, so I'd like to comment on two things you mentioned. One is we really have not had a lot of time over the past 2 years to do a lot of professional development with our teachers during the school year. And you guys have done an exceptional job of improving that for next year. And I do see that as moving in a really positive direction. It's really hard to help the people know where it is they need to make improvements when we don't have a lot of time during the school year to do that. And I think the changes we've made to the counter next year really help with that. And the second thing is we spent a lot of time this year working on the business chemistry. One of the biggest barriers to PLCs working well together is just people. Getting along with each other, liking each other, respecting each other as professionals, you know, and getting over some of those barriers. And I think it really was a good decision as we're trying to work through PLCs as a district to focus on that aspect. We all have things we bring to the table. We all have different ways we communicate and express our emotions. And the more we can understand that, the better we can work together to a common end. So I think we are making progress. I think.
Did all of the high school teachers read that book, or is it?
All the high school principals were working on it here, and they all took it back to their schools and implemented it in their PLC. So it was kind of a teach the teacher model. So, but I'll go ahead, Rick.
No, you guys, I just had one other.
Well, the last thing I was gonna say is that the tool that Ryan has been using, everybody's gonna use it next year, and they're all going to do this periodically throughout the year. And I think we can have good comprehensive data that we can share.
So Mastery Connect, whatever. I mean, that was you guys, Amanda was here. I don't know who else was here when we purchased that, but the assessment piece is really central, right? Like using formative assessments within their departments. Maybe this is a bigger question to evaluate. You know, are they developing their own? Are we using Mastery Connect? Is that a
That's a loaded question. It's a fair question. It is not being used abundantly in the high schools. Some of that has to do with initially when we rolled out Mastery Connect, kind of the bill of goods that we were sold in terms of how well it would align with Canvas. with, so I have these assessments that I've written that I'm using, and I'd like to just, transfer these into Mastery Connect and assign them to their state core standards, their stranded standards, and then I can, look at different standards and be very specific in my learning outcomes. And the amount of time it was taking the teachers to simply do that with their assessments was astronomical. You just one assessment to put it in Mastery Connect, put all of the standards in. Was just the amount of labor involved did not merit the difference in the outcome. So I think if there's a way that we could simplify that and help them to put some of the.
Just calling it out for what it is, like, I think the survey is great if we're talking about qualitative, a qualitative look at culture, right? And that's important, right? Like you said, teachers working together, teachers being able to be vulnerable, share. But to me, that's kind of PLC light. And we all know, when you get to schools that really do PLCs the way they should, it's results oriented, right? They can show you, here's how our assessments, here's how all of that works and how that drives and improves instruction. That to me is what we got to get at. And it's hard. I'm with you. I've been a high school principal. It's like herding cats sometimes, but where it can be done, especially in the core areas, right? I think we got to get to that place that it's, hey, this isn't negotiable. This is how we do CFAs, and this is how it informs instruction.
Every high school has certain PLCs in their schools that are bright, shiny stars.
Well, the data, and I'm looking at, other than just like one of the schools, most of them, it demonstrates that, most of them, are saying, between 60 and 70% are saying they are using data to inform instruction, but it just feels kind of fuzzy about what that, actually means. And to me, it relates even to a bigger picture with our grade distribution issues with failing grades, and because that's all left to chance by individual teachers in their own silo kingdom of how they determine that. So, I think it all kind of runs together, but I just, I want us to kind of push that envelope, and what are the non-negotiables when it comes to PLCs, and then where is the flexibility, and then you guys figure that out. But I think if we just leave it to, hey, does it feel good, and are you meeting? Yeah. And not getting at the root of what real PLC work is, then I think we're missing the boat.
Well, I think the biggest challenge might be overcoming the idea that PLC is a meeting.
Right.
It's not a meeting. It's a way of approaching your profession where you recognize that as a group of professionals, we have a lot more to offer our students than in isolation.
Yeah.
And everything you do,
informing your instruction
through that lens.
Huge mindset change.
It's a big mindset change.
Ms. Dolly,
So I agree with Amanda. I think, and it sounds like what Brighton's been using, we're gonna try to incorporate it, all of them. I think this is good. The sense I got from a lot of it is, it's the first time people had even thought about some of these questions. Are we even doing these things in our PLC? And so the evaluation piece, I think, is good because it helps people inform them of like, hey, this is something we really need to be working on. As we evaluate, it gives us a chance to see where we can improve. A couple things I noticed is just, it sounds like, and part of it, it's a work in progress, but just better guidance, maybe even a schedule of like, hey, these are things you did work on at certain periods of time. And even something across like schools of like, this is a Singleton PLC day, and it needs to be protected as that.
The schools are actually really good at trying to protect their days. They're pretty adamant about it. The teachers do too. They advocate for themselves. So something I want to mention about PLCs and why it's challenging to move a whole high school forward is you probably have 40, 50 PLCs in a building, and all of them are in different places in terms of their progress on the spectrum of how well they're functioning. To get up and give one PD to the whole faculty about next steps. I'm talking with my hands too much. It's okay. To get up and give one PD, about next steps is ineffective because everybody's next step is going to be a little different depending on where they're at in the process. So that's one of the biggest reasons schools are using these is so the administrators can see, okay, these are the things this PLC is doing well, and these are the areas where they are struggling, and this is where we can go in and focus and help them take the next step in moving their PLC forward. It's really, the purpose of these is to be more targeted and to give the groups of teachers that are meeting together, meet them where they are and to help them get further along the path.
Right, yeah. I think it just happened, it seemed like some PLCs are certainly struggling, they just don't know what best practices look like. And so I think some of the PD can be around, this is best practices. Let's have this PLC show how they're doing this, that they're really excelling at. And maybe they're struggling in another area, another PLC is doing well. But I think just helping, what are those expectations of what we're trying to look at within our PLC? And I think we see that in that evaluation form, but maybe even focusing on, in September, we really want to focus on CFAs or whatever it is. So there's a little bit more structure and what the expectations are with some of it. And examples of best practice may be helpful based on, that was what I sort of gained from some of those comments.
Well, I mean, it's pretty universal. I mean, it's really guided by those 4 questions, right? So clear standards in your curriculum, and then assessment, knowing how our kids are learning or not, and then intervention and enrichment. I mean, so those are that's what we should see, right? In all those conversations. And if it's not there, then it's PLC light. It's, hey, we're meeting, it feels good, but we're not really doing anything.
So yeah, I guess at least my next question, what professional learning opportunities are they going to have that is going to achieve what Ms. Dele is talking about? Because I'm a big believer, what you measure is what people will work toward, right? If we're not measuring anything, if we don't have any, if this is the first time in 2 years that they've received them, and it sounds like Brighton is well ahead of the game on that, but that some of these high schools haven't even thought to ruminate on those questions until now. I think we're not maximizing this as the opportunity.
I just had a question too. I think they are focusing on CFAs, and I think that it's a little too exclusively on test results. Because there's this comment from Jordan that says common formative assessments are useless for special ed. None of us have the opportunity to teach the same subject. And when I do get to general ed PLCs, the CFAs aren't always applicable to my kids. I wish we had a focus literally on anything else in PLCs. So scores are great, but I think the focus that you're talking about, making sure that we know where they're at, those 4 areas are far more. Yes, those 4 things are the things that we're emphasizing and not the test scores. Test scores are just a sample.
Yeah.
Right, but we even saw though with the data though, that they were using those scores then to inform instruction. So it was like they were focusing on it, but not necessarily basing instruction on those outcomes.
No, they're just trying to.
So it was, right, so it's like, we're not connecting all the pieces.
Right.
We're sort of,
Yeah, I'm not saying don't look at them, but I'm just saying this particular person said it's useless for this person, because when she does go to those PLCs, and special ed does do everybody's everything, and so they have to move around a bit.
Well, and some of the arts teachers would face the same challenge,
thing.
right? Where the measurement is fundamentally different, and I think we should, I don't know if as a district, we need to develop a rubric that adapts for that, so that each of those respective types of PLCs are adequately reflected in the way that we're measuring, right?
Well, and I'll add this caveat too. We're still at about 40% chronic absenteeism.
Right.
So we got a lot of kids that are not in school a lot of the time, and we can't teach them if they're not in class. So there's whammies that just have unfolded through the pandemic that are still a challenge, but yeah, it doesn't excuse us from doing the work. And so,
well, and this is just one,
one snapshot.
Well, no, that is just one snapshot. I think the tools that most of the high school principals use to measure PLCs are the weekly minutes. Every time they meet, they keep minutes, and they have notes of what they discussed, and they share it with their administrators, and they're able to kind of track their conversations and see where they're at, see how the meetings are going. And it is this is just one way that the principal's able to see into that, and this is more of them to evaluate themselves where they are, because the accountability is really coming more from the minutes. And something that is pretty common among areas where these content conversations become more challenging is focusing the conversations on pedagogy. So if we can all agree, as performing arts teachers, that these are the best approaches, reducing the amount of teacher talk, increasing student talk, increasing, opportunities to respond, and increasing feedback cycles. Those are very impactful in teaching all classes, especially performing arts classes. And if we can focus our PLCs on pedagogy versus content, then that makes it a much easier conversation that we can have as a group and move our practice forward. And that's also pretty common.
Okay. Anyone else have a last comment? All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is Elementary Tech Advisory Committee report by Superintendent Robbins and Assistant Superintendent Robinson.
Right, Dr. Robinson.
Let me just go ahead. Fair enough.
Just a big thanks to McKay for doing
Yes.
this, by the way. Yeah,
Big
Huge
undertaking.
lift.
That was a huge list.
So yeah, first, I guess, thanks for the opportunity. I can happily report that I think everything went about as well as it could have. We had a lot of great feedback. Scott and I spent about an hour and a half after the meeting ended and stuck around with a couple of parents that just had some additional questions. And so there weren't any additional pieces of feedback that, anyway, it was all very positive. So we're happy about that. So just wanted to quickly remind us of the timeline of where things have been, where they're going, and everything leading up until this point. And I figure as long as we continue this discussion, it's wise for us to continue to put this up there so that everyone can see and know and understand what we've been doing and how we've been going about. But from the time between March 19th and April 30th is when originally we were asking the questions of our BLTs, our principals, and our school community councils. And then we took that information as one set of data or piece of information there. Dr. Robbins presented on that. And then I shared with all of you the plan for this advisory committee. And then it too would be another piece of data. And then we met. And from the time that we met on May 28th, from May 30th to June 13th, roughly, we just kind of continued some of that communication. And then here we are presenting on a summary of everything that took place. So when we first met with the committee, these were the two main bulleted items that we made sure everyone that was a part of the committee fully understood. When this was originally discussed with Dr. Robbins and you as the full board, I made sure I went back and listened to every little piece and pulled little nuggets out and took them back to Dr. Robbins to make sure. And then when I spoke with all of you, it was very clear that we needed to make sure that this was just, again, another piece of information or data that we could collect and use on top of the other stuff that we already had, and that this committee was not a decision-making body. It was truly to collect information and provide some ideas. To let you know, the committee members consisted of 10 parents, 11 teachers, 4 principals, 3 strategic plan leads, 2 elementary directors, external relations had 2 individuals there as well. And the parents, I think this is an important piece of information to also remember, especially with a later point. Of the 10 parents, 9 of them were from Draper, Cottonwood Heights, and Eastmont. So just keep that in mind as we're talking about all of these things. So the format of the meeting, as we had originally explained, brief overview of the tasks, what we were doing. We talked about our current filtering system. Scott took a few minutes and just explained the things that we have done and how the system works and what we can do to improve upon it. Then Amber took a few minutes and talked about the purpose of technology and what we've been using it for in our classrooms. And then we broke into 4 different groups and talked about, well, you'll see the topics here in just a minute. And those 4 groups were led by our committee members. Leon was one of our leads. Scott led another one. Brian McGill and Amber Roderick was in another. And then we just had everyone kind of spread out and make sure that they were evenly divided and had equal representation in the different groups. They shared at the very end of their discussion, they then shared out to the larger group so all groups could hear what they were talking about, as well as answer any questions that say Dr. Robbins was in group A, he would be able to ask questions of group B just to see if he wanted to understand further what was there. And so that is essentially how that all went about. These were the four main topics that we split into the four groups. So what ended up happening is following that meeting, I compiled all the minutes from each of the groups and the discussion that we had afterwards, and then tried to summarize those into a comprehensive as well as very clear message, if you will, of what we all discussed and talked about. And then I sent that back out to the entire committee and said, here's the summary. What do we think? Did I miss anything? Are we misrepresenting any group? We took a few pieces of feedback, added those back, sent them back out, and continued to take additions and or clarifications up until I submitted this to you on the 12th. So there's been a lot of ongoing communication with all the different families and members that were a part of the committee itself. So what ended up happening is we were summarizing all of this, or when I was summarizing this, it fell into 5 main areas, if you will, and you can see what they are here. And we'll jump into each one of these and break them down so that you can see the different thoughts that were shared and how they align in these particular areas. So starting off, first and foremost, the families had talked quite a bit about just strengthening transparency, training, and communication. I'm sorry, I said families, but I'm going to just keep the committee continue to refer to these points because it did consist of a lot of our teachers and principals as well. But they did say that they are feeling a lot more informed about the strengths and limitations of our filtering system. However, they do still see an opportunity to learn more and or be more transparent with that tool and everything that we have there. So we'll see here on how they want that to be done. So we then took that, and here are some of the recommendations that they shared with us on how we might be able to improve that communication. They did talk about making sure that when we start notifying the families, there's another recommendation coming, sorry, lots of thoughts going on, but those notifications when we reach out to the family and say, hey, your son or your daughter has been doing these searches, they're coming from this particular email address, and that they're aware of what that email address is so it doesn't end up in their spam or some other random folder. They wanted to make sure that was very clear that they should be looking for this particular email. They also mentioned using Parent Square as that central communication platform, which already do, which is fantastic. But just wanted to also have social media and websites there for just support, not the main form of communication. They also wanted us to make sure that any updates that come about or policy changes in regards to technology, that they are out in a very clear and simple way, and avoiding that mass, here's 3-page document that says here are all the different things that we've done or we've changed as time goes on, and keeping it very timely. Another one was encouraged us to continue to share things during the parent-teacher conferences. We had a visual that was provided, and I think I gave that to you in the last board meeting as well. It looks like a dinner plate, and it's kind of broken up. They suggested using something like that in our parent-teacher conferences as well. And then also providing a summary of content keeper, and everything that is blocked or flagged on that, keeping our teachers aware because they're not always fully made aware of what that is. So those were some of the suggestions that they made in regards to how we can improve upon the communication side. They also talked about the importance of having a parent-signed tech agreement at the start of the school year. I believe you all are very much aware of, but if not, I do have a copy of one here. It's our it's referred to as the Responsible Access and Use Conduct Guidelines, and it's something that is part of registration at the very beginning of the year that parents all sign. It's been around for some time. I was even talking to Scott about it today, where at my school, we didn't have any students use computers and or go to the computer lab or anything until we had this physical copy in our hands. So it's a practice that is in place. So we feel pretty good about that, but just making sure parents are aware of it, reminding them of that would be great. Ensuring clarity on what triggers those inappropriate searches or flags. Some had asked for the specific lists of all the different words that have been blocked or the different areas, something we could certainly consider sharing. But one of the key things that they shared that I thought was not a terrible idea in any way, shape, or form is changing our default setting to an opt-out rather than an opt-in of notifying families when their child is making inappropriate searches. And so if they don't care or they don't want that information coming, then they could opt out of it. But aside from that, they would be receiving it. So that was one piece of information that I thought was a great idea. So moving on, it ended up, one of the other categories that we ended up having a lot of conversation around was just improving the filtering, monitoring, and the access protocols. So you can see all the different areas that they talked about here. I just barely mentioned that, where they asked for having access to the restricted content list, and the filtering logic, essentially wanting to know why or how that became blocked. Exploring the whitelisting. We've had a lot of question about whitelisting and trying to better understand what that means. And just to clarify, whitelisting, the way it currently is set up, is it's more whitelist categories rather than whitelisted site specific. Is that probably the easiest way of saying that, Scott? Yep. So you might have the category of TV or music or
AI services
or AI services, whatever. And some of those have been blocked, some of those have been opened up, rather than saying google.com is whitelisted, or getting very granular and specific there. So there was some conversation about that, and then talked about a lot of the parents have expressed, and that has been an ongoing communication to me as well, of just looking at whitelisting specific sites rather than categories. Consider blocking high-risk terms. This one is already taken care of as well, but that is something that we do every Wednesday, where we're looking at new phrases and terms and workarounds, and we're trying to do everything that we can there. This was news to me, this very next bullet. Teacher had mentioned hoping that we could consider getting the premium YouTube account for our teachers. And the reason for that is we once had the ability to embed videos within Canvas, and that prevented any and or all advertising or those pop-ups that come up that you hope to avoid. YouTube and whomever has since found a way to work around that. And so we're no longer able to do that. And the only way we can is obviously paying YouTube more money.
So if it's embedded in Canvas, is it live now?
It's,
Where before it was not, right? We could embed it and it would only be the video, but not all the ads.
Yeah, occasionally it's not consistent. It's inconsistent. We have not been able to find a trigger for it, but occasionally it does come up with the ads, even when it is embedded into Canvas.
which is recent. It's pretty new. So like I said, that was news to me and pretty surprising. Continuing on with the improving of the filtering, prioritizing land school training for teachers and substitute teachers. We had quite a few teachers that were excited about some of the not resources, but the abilities of land school that they weren't originally aware of. And so we talked about just enhancing the training there and making sure that they're aware of it. The substitute teachers, that's a whole nother challenge, getting them trained. And I maybe recommend something, an alternative to that, but I'm going to remain as neutral as possible and just share the information that they provided. And then teachers need just better support, understanding and responding to student attempts or hacks or override filters. So there's just some ongoing training that we can continue to provide our teachers.
While we're on that subject, and before we move on to the next slide, is there a way for teachers to receive a report similar to parents when a child hacks or tries to look up certain terms in their classroom?
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we have been talking about, as well as came up in this committee. Currently, the administration can go in and access that information and then provide it to teachers. And ultimately, the request has come from teachers now saying, hey, I'd like to know as well, especially if it's happening, during class, different things like that. So oftentimes it's not real time. And I think that's where some of the teachers' concerns come from, of wanting to have it at real time, because administration has to check it that night or the next morning, or you see what it's not kind of that immediate.
I would imagine though, like if that's followed up on, that sends a real chilling effect on a student who's been doing that, especially when not only their parents are informed, but the teacher is too.
Yeah. And one of the items that we're going to be talking about here in just a minute is the 3-strike piece as well, and some of the warnings that might be popping up. And I think that only adds to the chilling effect as you go through that process. So again, now this one jumps into kind of the device access, but it's still in the improving the filtering, monitoring, and access protocols. And there were a few parents that had stressed and asked for the option for families to opt out of Chromebooks altogether. And then if a student, one of the other pieces that came up in a different group, so I was making my way around, they had talked about, because they had heard some of our previous discussions about the possibility of maybe shutting down access when school is out. And if we were to go that route, they wanted to have the ability, meaning parents and teachers, to work together to give access to that student if they were traveling and or out sick or whatever the case may be. So again, that was only if we decided we were going to limit access when it was after hours that they wanted. That was an option there. Getting into the instructional balance and student well-being, there was a lot of time spent on just the balance of tech use and emphasizing that it's a learning tool, not entertainment, especially in our early grades. So then it got into that group in particular, talked a lot about K2 and then 3-5. And in K2, they suggested or asked that we consider removing gamified instructional software. And one had came back, as you recall, I said that I've been continuing to get more and more feedback from the time we had the meeting until then, and one parent just came back and said, hey, I would like to see that across K5, not just K2. And the suggestion that was made is that the money that's going toward those programs be used for certified teachers and that they could use that money that way. Just to clarify, since we're on this at this point, rather than waiting for any questions here at the end, the software that is being purchased are based off of grants that come from the state. It's not money that we've just pulled out of our budget to pay for a program that we thought would be great. So I'm talking about things like iReady, Lexia. Yes, thank you. Those are all programs that, yep, the state basically came forward and then they provide grant money to cover those. And then another ask was that we consider eliminating one-to-one devices for our K-5 students. And one parent had suggested that it become more of just a computer class, like our brain booster technology class itself, rather than working on devices in the classroom, that it become kind of like what we used to do with going to a lab. Continuing on in this particular area, again, considering limiting the Chromebook carts in 4th and 5th grades for only grade-specific projects that are led by the teacher. And then consider, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, that true whitelist, rather than categories, doing very specific granular sites. And just wanted to make sure that we represented this parent well. We spoke at length. She just wanted to make sure that everyone understood that finding it and addressing inappropriate sites after they are found is simply not good enough, and that the parent stressed that her student and all students deserve better. So basically referring to stumbling across something and then us trying to go in and fix it. Why not fix it by just having a very granular whitelist is really what the point was. Okay, another recommendation or suggestion that they provided was to create and communicate grade-specific expectations of technology use. Very, again, almost granular. In kindergarten, this is what we would use it for and how much time would be appropriate or acceptable. Here are programs that you could use. Here are a whitelisted list of websites or whatever, and do that for every single grade. So that was another thing they asked for us to consider. I already mentioned this one, using certified teachers instead of the software itself. That would just really come down to quite a bit of money, as well as We basically have to turn away some of those grants, which is totally fine, and just, it's not money that we're pulling from a budget that we can reallocate toward certified teachers. It's grant money specific to those programs. And then allowing opt-outs from certain intervention programs or classroom technologies based on student needs and family preference. So some of those programs are used for interventions, and if the family chose that they didn't want that intervention for their child, they would ask that they might have the opportunity to opt out of that. They did express that they appreciate and thought that the programs like our morning meetings and drive time lessons are moving forward. They're great. They just want to continue to see that not only celebrated, but enhanced and continue to be improved upon as we go along. So that was a nice little celebration there. Moving beyond that basic instruction, teaching the students to develop that philosophy of technology. What's the purpose of it? You know, just like we do with all of our instruction, just going deeper and helping them to have a better understanding of responsible use and having it be an ongoing thing rather than maybe just some of this digital citizenship that happens occasionally. But they are, I believe, once a month, if I remember correctly, built in our Thrive Time. And then moving on again, coming down to okay, so now we're on the restrike. So this is something that has been talked about. This is an ongoing work in progress, I would say. And it's really just trying to figure out who is communicated with, how it's going to be communicated. Is there a thing that pops up on the student screen, all those different types of things. When it came down to the clear consequences, those are already outlined within our levels of behavior document, which is great. So that's already in place. And then the communication protocols, we would clarify, get those cleaned up as well. But I think the key word here that we want to make sure that we really address is the consistent implementation of, that it's very consistent across all of our schools and with all of our students K through 5. And then allowing teachers access to tools such as the search history, flag reports, and we had already talked about that as well with your question, Amanda. They too felt like that would be very beneficial. Communication equity. They talked again about back to school, how we can readdress policies, providing very short bulleted items, resources that help them to know and understand what's all taking place. And then having it not just go out through the digital platforms like our Parent Square, just to make sure everyone's fully aware of what's happening and how it might impact them. And earlier when I was talking about the specific parents that were represented, this is one of the main reasons why I wanted to make sure that that was on the forefront of our minds, because a parent actually had a really important comment that was made that I would love to share with you all as well in this conversation. But really stress the importance of actively engaging diverse communities across the district to ensure that all of our families have a voice in this process. One parent said, if you were to take a look around this room right now, we all come from very privileged backgrounds, and our kids are going to be just fine. If we take these things away, we'll be fine. But we don't necessarily know and understand the direct impact it will have on other communities, and would encourage, I think she used the word encourage, or implore the district to dive deep, especially with our Title I communities and other areas, to see how this might impact them, these larger decisions. So I thought that was a pretty powerful statement and a nice reflective comment from this mom. So then moving on, kind of overall, they were very thankful for all the efforts that are there, for the adjustments that are being made. We all agreed that there are some areas that we can refine and tweak and modify. And Scott and I, as I mentioned earlier, as we were talking with a couple of these moms, both of us kept encouraging them and saying, you know, let's keep this communication going. As soon as we see something, we're on the same team. This isn't about, you know, we'll let this one slide. Like, we too want to know. And the amount of time and effort that's already being put into this is pretty overwhelming, and it makes me quite proud of the team for all of their work. And the parents were very responsive to that. I think ultimately there's a hope that we will move to a tech-free environment and or an option to be tech-free. And I believe that this will be an ongoing narrative until a decision is ultimately made by us as a district of, are we going to offer that? Or are we going to move away from tech altogether? Are we gonna limit it to this or this? And I think we're just gonna have to be very mindful of that altogether. Parents did ask and suggest that this conversation continue with our secondary. We had to kind of keep navigating that throughout and reminding them that this was a K-5 conversation at the time, but that I would stress to all of you that they would love to see this continue on in our secondary. Then we went through all the adjustments that have already been made or currently are in progress. I don't know if you want me to keep going through these. You've all had a chance to look at this. They were presented by Dr. Robbins in our last board meeting as well. These are just a few of those. Here's the other list. I know the RFP's gone out, implementing the 3-strike we're currently working on, and the ongoing communication, the BARC. It's all been either already in place or is continuing to be addressed. You all know what the Technology Connect portal is, right? The TCP portal. That's where a teacher or a parent can suggest or make a recommendation for something to be blocked or removed. That communication always goes to that person after whatever action is taken. And I think the overall, going back to the communication at the beginning, they're hoping that that can be a more broad message as well, not just to the family that's reaching out. So I'll make sure that that was clear again. So any questions that you might have?
Before we go into questions, I want to point out that we will be bringing this back again in the fall. So we know, like, there's no decision points tonight. There's going to be an opportunity for us to get clarification, ponder this, get in touch with people in our areas. So I just wanted to throw that out before your questions. So.
Go ahead, Katie. You go first. A couple comments. First of all, thank you, because I know this is an immense amount of work, and thank you to Scott and your team for all the things that have already been done up to this point. I think it's fantastic, and I think the feedback we received has been great and in line with sort of where we're trying to go with this more mindful tech. I think understanding that technology is a tool, but it shouldn't be a babysitter or whatever in our classrooms, that we're using it mindfully for what, for the uses we're. Relating to your questions, I don't think we can go to a no-tech model. I think that's doing a disservice to our students, plain and simple. I mean, we talk about the information we're getting from our focus groups, the Innovation Center, and they're saying kids need to know even more stuff about tech and not less. So I don't think we can go to a no-tech model. Do we offer the option to allow people to opt out? It makes that really hard for our teachers. It's like a mom, having to make multiple meals for each of their kids. And that's tricky, particularly because of what's coming from their state with some of our curriculum and things that, we have science curriculum and they're doing simulations online. The assessments give the teachers immediate feedback, being able to do their assessments. Now, I know in some classes, they're still doing an assessment on paper so they can show all their work and then they'll put it into the computer, but it just helps a teacher quickly pinpoint where there's issues. And so I'm not sure that's the best option for our teachers for allowing that opt out. We do have school choice. So if that is the model, that's what's hard. That's what's hard. I mean, you got to do what's best for your kids. I think it's, really working on this mindful tech. And I think what this committee identified is just, some of it is better training, helping our teachers. There's been a lot thrown at them, helping them to better understand what tools they have access to and what maybe appropriate expectations and tech use are for per grade level and looking at those things. So some things are hard, even with whitelist. Maybe the younger grades can be a totally whitelist, but as your kids start doing research, it's really hard to be in a full whitelist kind of model. And so I think we have to look at those that, elementary maybe is even 2 separate models, and then middle and then high school, as far as when we're looking at filtering and those kinds of things. But to a point, I had a teacher I've been talking to about what does tech look like in your classroom to really understand what is sort of mandatory related to the curriculum and what is more of a supportive role. But she did come back and she said, let the board know how amazing the Learning Summit was this year. It was phenomenal. She's really excited for next year. She learned some things that will help her even be a better teacher and to help free up her time with some of the tech that is available. So thank you for everybody who did that. And I think as we can keep, I think our teachers want to learn. They want the professional development. They're just, it's overwhelming during the school year to try to figure it all out. And when they have some of that free time, I think if we can provide that support.
So again, thank you. This is a lot. It was a lot, heavy lifts. I know there were very strong feelings. It sounds like you guys had an incredibly productive
I thought so.
meeting. It's awesome. And I'm really happy to see some of the ideas and things that came out of it. I've just been sitting here ruminating about the fact that I think smartphones came out in 2008. A lot of our teachers came out of their professional learning, like out of college before then. And so they came out onto this stage where this is very new technology. And myself as a parent with smartphones, I think our teachers have very much felt that way in many ways about technology. I don't think it was ever ill-intended to have some of these difficulties, but similar to how we're finally figuring things out and now cell phones aren't allowed in high schools. And I think that that's a good move. I think we're figuring out along the way some of these changes too. I will say, I'm curious whether or not the conversation specifically around Google and Google products ever came up, because I know, well, maybe that's more of a conversation for middle and high school. Some of the most consistent complaints or concerns from parents are surrounding like Google Docs or
File sharing.
yeah, file sharing and even it just, I don't know why Google like doesn't provide an educational platform that disallows some of that. I mean, in my mind, they should take more responsibility. We have had this conversation. And the YouTube thing, like, that's a total bummer. Like, I'm like so sad to hear about that tonight. So, yeah, I think that we probably ought to look at how we can make sure, because YouTube can be an excellent learning resource. There's so much on there that kids like, and a lot of kids that are visual learners, they need to be able to see like scientific principles demonstrated in a visual way sometimes, right? And so if we can figure out what the cost would be on that for those licenses, I would not be opposed to the idea of having a survey that could go district-wide just to ask how many parents would want a tech-free model. And the reason I'm asking that is because in mine and Holly's area, there are a lot of parents who keep asking for this. And the thought is, rather than asking a teacher to divide themselves between those two things, maybe we just gauge and see if there is a strong desire of parents, like collectively, to have a magnet school. I mean, I know we have elementary schools that in large measure have a lot of empty space because of enrollment. Maybe we provide some classrooms like that. But I don't think that they're gonna let go of this or allow this to go to bed until they know whether or not that is a viable option. And they will walk and go to other places. A lot of them have. And so why not ask? Like, maybe there's more pockets of parents that want that than we realize. I would agree with Katie. I personally would not put my child in one of those models because similar to the iPhone, similar to some of the other technologies that have come to us in recent years, she is absolutely right. AI is here. It's barreling like a freight train, and the kids have got to learn how to use it. With that said, when I was at the pre-delegate assembly for Utah School Board Association last week, I saw our new state superintendent, Molly Hart, who has been over Summit schools, over those charter schools. And we were having a conversation about tech. And I said, how have you guys done it at Summit? I'm just curious because, you know, they're right in my community, they're right in my area. And she said, up until recently, we have only allowed Chromebooks for 4th and 5th graders, but recently we've disallowed it for all of elementary. But we still have Chromebook carts that the teachers are allowed to use for specific educational purposes. And so I'm not opposed to that idea of just making sure, I mean, I think it's not altogether that different from what we have. And again, this goes back to what Katie was saying about, you know, training our teachers better about how to use it mindfully. And so in that respect, I think a whitelist could work. I mean, I guess I don't really, I would be interested in hearing more from teachers, how unwieldy a whitelist would or would not be for them at the elementary level. Anyway, so those are kind of my general thoughts, and thank you again. And I appreciate whoever's listening, the parents and others who were willing to participate and give their voice. It's important.
I agree. I wish I would have said that at the very beginning. I actually had it in my notes to make sure I thanked everyone that was a part of it, because I truly felt that it was very beneficial. It brought light to several things that we've been thinking about, but also things that we're like, oh, we can, that's easy. We can easily address that, you know, like the communication side of things. I think there's a lot of good came from it, and I'm just grateful to everyone that was willing to participate. And honestly, I felt like it, for as heavy as a lift as it was, it couldn't have gone more smoothly, I think.
Well, and as a follow-up to part of what was mentioned, I absolutely think that we should plan on having a discussion surrounding middle school specifically and high school specifically. I don't even think we should group those two together, because developmentally, there's a lot of difference between those two age groupings. And I agree with whoever the parent was that said that we need to consider how this will impact other communities. I think some of their suggestions, if we are going to move forward with that, we need to get feedback from other communities about that.
Because for sure, there's a lot of, I mean, supports, particularly these kids that are multi-language learners. I mean, I've seen Chromebooks be fantastic in the schools, as the kids are still able to participate in a discussion because they're able to translate stuff using their computer and device and get stuff at their level. So I think there's a lot of things that we really be mindful of, how this can be a great educational tool for kids that are coming from other backgrounds and situations.
But do we have, I mean, I think this was discussed before, do we have a rubric of what constitutes a good use of technology? Because I'll be honest, I mean, this is my other artistic side. If you're gonna ask me about whether or not I'd want a child on a Chromebook to learn about certain things versus whether or not I would like them to use an arts integrative model that's hands-on, I would prefer the second. And so there's this part of me, it's like, I think sometimes we've developed so much of a dependence on tech that we don't think about what other options we can use to teach a child something effectively in a hands-on way.
I think a lot of that even stems from how exciting it gets. And we even are doing that, right, with the idea of the innovation center and all these things that we can do there. Watching like the Spheros or the Kaibots and all these things being programmed, like kids doing coding in elementary school.
Awesome.
Holy crap. Yeah. I mean, that's pretty amazing. And so I think it comes down to this mindful tech. I love that phrase. I think it's just, how do we best utilize it to our advantage and help kids advance and learn and grow while maintaining great instruction across the board, you know. And it's a tool. It's really a tool. It's not a babysitter or the teacher.
Amber. I missed show.
That's fine. Thank you. I just want to start by saying thank you to Dr. Robinson, and thank you to the parents and all the teachers. I mean, that whole committee. I really appreciate them coming in. It was the end of school and it was really crazy busy, I'm sure. But we just got a lot of good information from that. And I do really agree, I do agree with what Katie said. Just that, you know, it could be hard to get rid of it, but also, you know, for teachers, and I don't know if it's the best for students. I am curious how the rest of the board feels about Amanda's suggestion of surveying parents. Like, do you guys want to do that? I mean, that's something obviously we'd have to do in the fall. Like, we can't do it right now. So maybe if you guys can weigh in on that. And then also just kind of to summarize, I feel like, you know, maybe McKay, when you bring this back, if you guys could, the administration, can you guys make recommendations to the board and kind of summarize and do, like, tell us what you guys think you can actually do and implement, right? And kind of summarize, because there's a lot of great information there, but I mean, there's, you know, what, 20 or 30 things. So if you guys can do all those, great. But I think,
Oh, go ahead. Yeah,
sorry, it would just be helpful for the board if you could bring that back. And then in my mind, I'm just trying to think, like, what would the board actually vote on? Because I don't know if actually any of these things are board policies, right? But I do think we can give direction, but let's just be thinking about that. So anyway, go ahead, Superintendent.
Well, I was just gonna say to start with, maybe to just ponder on this over the summer, is, right now, we have many teachers that are accommodating parents' requests to not use tech. And that divide is starting to occur in a place where the lift is getting heavier and heavier and heavier because the expectation is that we meet students' needs where they're at in their own learning, right? And to do that, if you have 5 students that are multilingual, 5 students that are sped, 5 students that are accelerated, without these tools with technology, and you have 25 plus kids in a class, it's impossible. And so we've kind of been loose on not giving real clear guidance to principals and teachers about, if you can accommodate. I mean, I think a lot of teachers have done that, but I think, kind of to Amanda's point, we got to get to a place where I don't think we're saying that, hey, within our current model, we're saying there's going to be a tech-free option, in my classroom at Willow Canyon or one of our schools. But the option would be that we develop a model that maybe it is outside, or a magnet that is built around those principles. But I think saying to our teachers, hey, Karen, you gotta teach 10 kids with no technology and 20 with, that's impossible. I mean, and we're trying to meet needs of students that are so diverse, and that's the expectation. I mean, when I hear things like, well, that worked for us when we were kids, we didn't have technology, but you think about our experience, teachers taught to the middle. I mean, you weren't, there wasn't an expectation that the teacher met all of our needs in the room. It was, I throw the instruction out. If you get it, great. If you don't, then someone else has to pick up the pieces to try and support and supplement that. But now the expectation is you meet my students' needs where they're at in their learning, regardless of what's happening with everybody else in the classroom. So that's why technology is so important right there.
So let's just go around and answer President Schill's question, starting with Ms. Patterson.
I think if we had an explanation written in all other than English language to some of our areas, I think a survey would be helpful. And they need some background, because obviously your 2 groups didn't get a chance to engage, or didn't choose to engage in the committee. So we need to reach out to them and help them engage, to make sure that their voice is heard, because I really think that that's a very important factor that we're not addressing at all. If the parent hadn't said anything at all, it would have been completely ignored. And I think I know who the parent was, but she's amazing. I really, really feel that we need to make sure that whatever it is we decide, that the entire district gets some input. So yes, I think a survey would be appropriate. I don't know if it would be just exclusively, do you want to be home taught or not? Do we want to include any of the other variables, or just keep it simple?
We're not putting together the survey yet.
I know. Well, I'm just saying, yes, I think we need to, I feel like we need to check with the district, but make sure that we reach out and include those communities that did not participate.
Do you mind if I clarify something really quick, or just seek clarification for myself? We're talking about the survey. Are we talking about, what I heard President Schill talking about was a survey for whether or not we want a tech-free option?
Right.
Tech-free magnet school, I think was the question.
Yeah.
Well, he threw in magnet school, but
Well, yeah.
That's kind of what
in
I was
magnet
referring
school,
to.
that's,
And then the other piece, like Karen starts to talk about also making sure the rest of the communities are involved. So are we surveying them something as well? So I just want to make sure we're all on the same page.
I don't know if I can talk, but
you can talk.
I don't have all the answers with technology, but I wonder if we would consider a survey where we surveyed our community if they want a school without math, or school without social studies, or school without science. And if we think that technology is any less important than any of those things, they're going to live a successful life in the 21st century. I think as a public educational institution, I think providing variety and responding to parent needs is important. I also think we have to look at the greater good of society. I don't think technology can be seen as just a tool.
entity by
It's not just a tool. It's an essential skill to live a functional life in the 21st century. And I just feel passionate about that.
So we have 7 minutes, so let's just go around and give our answers to that question.
And I might retract that if you're not gonna reach out to that community about whether you wanna,
It would be everyone.
so you would or you would not, because.
So it's not a technological survey, it's
You wanna.
do you want an option without technology, whether that's in a magnet school or whether that's something else? And to be clear, this isn't a giving direction, this is a what do we think, so that we can have further discussions on it if we think it's a good idea.
So support that.
All right, so I have a couple of thoughts. I completely agree with what Tom said. We cannot be taking technology out of our classrooms, just like we can't take math or science or anything else. I am against doing a survey if we're just talking about creating a new strand and pathway that's technology. Yeah, I'm only okay with a survey if we're looking at studying a new school. Otherwise, I don't think that
No
there's.
point, you're just giving false hopes.
Right, and that's again, I don't think we should be doing a survey altogether. I mean, unless we're gonna be doing one for a school, because I think we're gonna be creating an expectation that we're not gonna be able to meet at all. There's just no way that I think we're gonna be able to create a technology-free space, whether it's at a magnet school or in a traditional school. It's just, I don't think it's possible, and I don't think it's a good
It's not in a
service for our
traditional
kids. I don't think it's good for our kids, so I'm against doing a survey.
I think we need to figure it out. Basic interest, and if at the end of the day, it's an overwhelming majority that has no interest and there's not enough to justify that, then that's important for that community. For me, I would like one.
We'll go Katie, then we'll go me, then we'll go back to you.
I'm on the fence. I mean, it's, part of it is, what are we gonna do with actions of the survey? And, you know, if we're not really looking at wanting to do a whole magnet school or whatever, doesn't matter, but I agree with Amanda, it's important to know this information, but I think it would have to be presented in the right way of why, you know, the why. I think a lot of where this is coming from is a lack of understanding about how tech is used in the classrooms. That all they see are the supportive programs that come home that the kids can do after school on their programs, but they're not seeing how the things are integrated in the curriculum, the things that they're using that way. Parents are not seeing that. So I think part of it is we could do a better job of teachers communicating how they're using tech in their class each and every day. And so they don't understand, they're not on iReady or ST Math all day long, and these things that are maybe some of them a little bit more gamified, or, you know, where the free time. I think that was an issue that we've addressed. So I think part of it is just having teachers, maybe at the beginning of the school year, communicate better exactly how tech is used in their classroom and how much time kids are on tech. There's this assumption that they're just on tech all day long and they're just playing games all day long on their computer. But if you spend a day in a classroom, that's not the case.
I think if we give them information back to school, I know.
I think that we don't have the bandwidth to start a charter school, and so survey's pointless. Nothing can come of it. We're not gonna have a classroom in a school without technology, and maybe someday in the future we'll have the bandwidth to start a charter school. But with the innovation center and with everything else that we're going on, I mean, if we wanna truly burn out administration, I think that's a path to go down. But otherwise, I just don't see a way that it could happen. So I would be opposed to it for that reason, because we can't do anything with it right now. Okay. President Show.
Okay. I mean, I do understand your point, Amanda, but I actually think that's a super small percentage of parents. So I even think if we survey, the overwhelming majority would not agree. So I am going to say I'm against the survey, just for the reasons Jackson and Andrew just said. But are we 3-3? Like, Karen, did you say yes? And then I'm not sure really where Katie landed.
I was on the fence. I would probably say no on the survey right now. I don't think it's gonna drastically change what we're gonna do. And I agree, it's a lot of pressure on our administration to have to put it together and manage it.
Yeah. Okay, I would agree. What So I think we don't want a survey, but I like what you said, Katie. I actually think it would be important for the board to understand exactly how technology is used. I think that's information that would be helpful to us to bring back maybe at the next meeting. I mean, I know that's adding something else, but really that's important for our parents to know as well. Like, how are they using it? The one thing I think we could talk about, which I don't know, it's opening another thing, is maybe we do something K2 is technology free. I don't know. At least, I mean, that's just an idea. We could talk about that. Okay. Oh,
She's going,
we're
no.
almost out of time. I'm aware of time, so I'm going to stop talking. Thanks, everyone.
What Rick said is why she would say that.
We are out of time. We do have some great subject matter experts that we can still reach out to clarify items, as well as speaking with our constituencies. And again, we're gonna bring this back, so it's not the end of the technology conversation. It's just the end of the technology conversation tonight. So with that, we'll take a short break, and then we'll be back for our business meeting at 7.
Who said I did reach out to you this year and
Welcome to the business meeting of the Canyons Board of Education. Today is Tuesday, June 17th, 2025. We are meeting at the district office located at 9361 South, 300 East in Sandy, Utah. We do have President Schill joining us remotely. First item is to approve the agenda for tonight, June 17th, 2025. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll move that we approve the agenda for tonight, June 17th, 2025.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second that motion.
All right, is there any discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right. We will now be led in the Pledge of Allegiance. By Danny Davis, Director of Accounting. All right, next item on the agenda is patron comments. We do not have any patron comments for tonight. So we will go ahead to the consent agenda. If I can have a motion to approve the consent agenda, and please read each of the items.
I move that we approve the consent agenda, which comprises A, approval of minutes for June 3rd, 2025, B, approval of hire and termination reports, C, approval of student overnight travel, D, approval of purchasing bids, E, approval of May financial reports, and F, approval of administrative appointments.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All right, we'll go ahead and take a vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. All right, next item on the agenda is new business. Item A, Canyons Innovation Center update and naming and branding discussion. So this is a third reading, but just so we're all aware, we don't have to do something tonight. With our process, we like to target that third reading for action. However, that's 3 readings for transparency as opposed to 3 meetings. Now we're at a wall and we have to make a decision. So this is one of those things that we need to make sure we get right. And so I will turn the time over to, is it Kirsten Stewart, Associate Director of Communications.
Thank you, Vice President Edel, members of the board. Happy to be here again and talking about our progress with the naming and branding of the high-tech learning center that will soon occupy the former Draper headquarters of tech giant eBay. As you're aware, the Board of Education has the authority to name all buildings, all building remodels or other facilities within the district. As a point of information, the board doesn't necessarily have to take formal action. I think some of you were here with Glacier Hills Elementary, so you'll remember that the board didn't take a formal vote to approve the name, but directed the administration to move forward with it. So tonight we're going to briefly review 4 final contenders that we have up for consideration tonight and discuss next steps. Before we review those names, though, I wanted to briefly remind everyone of the process kind of leading up to today. You know, in a lot of ways, naming an organization or a program is a little bit like naming a child, right? Feels like the stakes are pretty high. You know, you want the name to be modern but timeless, edgy, but, you know, safe and kind of unique, but not too weird, right? And I think that's where we are. And the board, though, however, in its wisdom, gave us sort of some guidelines, right, to sort of guide this process. So when we started initially, the board made clear that you wanted two things. One, stakeholder engagement, and two, engaging students in the process of coming up with a name. And we've really worked, I think, to fulfill both those goals. As you know, we have engaged students in the name ideation and then in some of the research leading up to our development of a brand guide. So we've performed stakeholder surveys, as you know, where we had all of CSD's high school students and middle school students and parents actually give us feedback on what they'd like to see from this kind of learning center. We actually also asked them to provide some naming ideas. We did the industry focus groups. Susan did that, performed that with Senator Pat Jones. You know, the creative team here at Canyons District has worked really hard. Fierce brainstorming sessions, as I've discussed, but in previous board meetings. Of course, the staff and faculty at CTEC have been very involved in brainstorming sessions and actually kind of informal focus groups. And of course, the students, right? They've performed a competitive analysis of nearby tech centers and a SWOT analysis to kind of understand what makes us different, what makes us tick, what makes us stand apart from other schools that are in this market. And then most recently, they participated in a branding activity with Gardner Design. That's the company that works with MHTN, our architects, to kind of bring this brand to life visually. Those are the students, you can see there. They good representation from all of our high schools. On the left there, that picture on the high left, you can see those are the students standing with their word clouds. Those were as part of that second activity that we did with Gardner Design, where we kind of challenged them to think about what the different brand names that were on the table meant to them. And the two names that resonated most for them, I think, were Nexus and Synergy. Those are also the two names that we have before us today that were advanced by the steering committee to the board. At the last board meeting, and during the board roundtable, we discussed some additional names submitted by Gardner Design. Those were the kind of the outgrowth of a visual metaphor that the architects brought to us as sort of their way of, it was a way of them anchoring their ideas for, or plans for the interior design of the building. We kind of talked about this idea of, you know, students being on this journey or path of discovery, as illustrated, you know, moving from what's visible, what they can see, to what they can't see, what they don't quite know yet, as illustrated by kind of like this visible and invisible light wave spectrum. We also kind of talked about, you know, waves colliding, like ideas, disciplines, and talents that will be converging at this new school. And that discussion brought forth two additional names for consideration: Confluence and the Wave. So the light metaphor is really powerful because, as we've discussed, brands aren't just an image or a logo. They're not a texture. They're not even like what the inside of the school is going to look like. They're a story. And I think we know what our story is, because we're writing it. This is a story about what you get when you combine, you know, the former headquarters of eBay and a forward-thinking school board. It's the symbol of a dot-com. It's the symbol of a dot-com boom and the digital age being reborn as a launch pad for generations of innovators. It's kind of the story of what you get when you get young, curious people in the same room, a kind of living lab with business leaders. So I think while we want this brand to differentiate us from the crowd and be just like a little bit unexpected, what I'm also hearing from you is that you want it to be grounded in what the board's vision is for this learning center. It is, at the end of the day, a school. So, of course, these are kind of our key differentiators that we've identified. And below there are the durable skills or habits that we want students leaving this school with. And of course, we have many stakeholders that we're responding to, and we want our brand to resonate with these stakeholders. So per the board's request, we've added some modifiers to some of our names for your consideration today. We've also looked for some ways to kind of slightly modify the spelling of some of our these names so that to kind of create a bit more brand ownability or distinction. For example, with Nexus, right, you can see Nextus. It's kind of a play on Nexus with next, kind of invoking this forward orientation. Nexus with the XUS is kind of a very visual first variation, right? It kind of forces you to engage with it and ask yourself, what it means and how to pronounce it. With the modifiers, we've tried to either explicitly tie, for this example, Nexus to Canyons District, or pair it with something like Works, which is a very active word. It kind of gives it an impactful feeling. Nexus Point or Nexus Point Nexus are pretty self-explanatory. It ties explicitly to the innovation point where this building will be adjacent that growing tech sector. Synergy is the next name. So we've kind of done the same thing with Synergy, pairing it with the point or the slopes. I kind of like Synergy at the slopes or Synergy slopes. It kind of has that nice double meaning. And then we gave you an alternate spelling. Canyon Synergy Center, Synergy with a C, which kind of canyonizes the word a little bit. I know there was some concern that it's a maybe too well-used word. It doesn't have a lot of meaning. The Wave, so this was kind of a latecomer. It's a really provocative word to be sure. I think it's a little bit more abstract too than the other names, and so probably we'll need some concrete modifiers and taglines to kind of help people explain, or to help explain to people what it is. So Wave Academy or the Wave at Canyons are kind of attempts to do that. I'm going to move fast through these because I know you have all had time to digest them. Confluence. Finally, confluence is something we felt maybe needed to be paired with something shorter, like a 1-syllable or 2-syllable modifier, because it is a little hard. You know, it's a 3-syllable confluence, so it needed to have something short paired with it. So here they all are, just for ease of reference, along with some of the modifier options. These aren't the full list of options that, of course, we have in our repertoire. We can always come up with more, but I mean, I'd love to hear what you're all thinking, even if you feel we need to take another run at this with the steering committee. I know as Vice President Mr. Edel suggested that, you know, we want to get this right. I want to get this right. I think it's important that we get this right, but I think we also need to remember that no name ever really feels fully right until it's brought to life, right? Through a visual context, but more than that, through an identity that unites everyone who's a part of it, right? So this brand is going to come to life in the climate and culture of the school. And that story will evolve, and we will continue to tell the story. So just food for thought, but I'd love to hear what you're all thinking.
Ms. Daly.
Thank you, one, for all your work on this. It's tricky trying to get this name right, but we really want it to represent what this center is going to be all about. And so my comment is, I'm curious as to why, you know, we've been using the name Canyons Innovation Center sort of as a placeholder name, but I think innovation is really what we're targeting at. You know, it's one of the things that we're really trying to achieve and make happen here. And so I'm just curious as to why we're sort of stepping away from using innovation. Now, maybe it's using one of these and then in like a subtitle, you know, Canyon Center of Innovation or something like that, that we're still keeping that focus and that goal that we're working towards front and center with this center.
So Innovation Center, I think, you know, it's a viable option. It's been what we've been referring to it as for many weeks now, many months now. I think the reason that we didn't go that route, and we did have some ideas initially on the table, like Center Point or the Innovation Point, you know, and I think one of the ways that we chose not to go that route is we didn't want something too descriptive. We wanted something a little bit more associative, something that kind of challenged people to think a little bit more, reach a little higher. So I don't think it's outside, you know, I mean, we could certainly bring it back and consider it.
Ms. Oaks.
Thank you for your presentation and for your patience, Kirsten. You've been extraordinarily patient with all of us during this process. I think to what Ms. Daly's question was, one of the conversations we had when we spoke with the branding firm is how powerful it is to have a center where the name speaks for itself. And Catalyst up in Davis School District is very much like that. They don't have to say the Catalyst Innovation Center, the Catalyst, they immediately know how to recognize what it's about. So I think that's actually really solid and really powerful. But to give a little bit of feedback for me, like, I love the idea of Nexus and XUS. It's cool. Like, I don't know, like seeing it like that, I was like, oh, I kind of think of that word differently now. If synergy were to be chosen, I like synergy slopes. Since we're close to Silicon Slopes, I actually think it's pretty cool. We're going to be working with a lot of those companies. As you know, I like the Wave. I think the Wave Academy, the Wave Exchange, Wave Works, I don't know, there's a lot of fun iterations. So those would probably be my preference at this point. Confluence to me feels a little wordy and hard to say. And I think when Convergence Hall comes out, I think it will be easy for the public kind of to mix up those two words. So.
Mr. Lewis.
All right. My preference still lies in confluence, just based on the uniqueness and it's a very unique word. If we're looking for a name that is very much going to invoke a sense of uniqueness like Catalyst did, I think Confluence does a really good job at that. I still have this issue with synergy where it just doesn't mean a whole lot. Like what Andrew spoke to the last meeting, at the last board meeting, I'm really having a hard time getting over that, even with the additives at the end. I don't feel like it's special to us. I don't feel like it's the name of a school as well. And I don't know. I feel the same kind of thing about Nexus as well. It just doesn't feel like us. It doesn't feel like specific to us, to Canyons, you know. Just that specific to Canyons or education specifically at all. But those are my thoughts. I also really like the Wave because it's very Utah theme, and it also kind of invokes a sense of like ripple effect, like kind of what the images that we saw at the last meeting. I thought the Wave kind of fit well with those as well. Those are my thoughts.
Ms. Patterson.
I don't have one that I love the very, very, very most, but having the adjectives attached to them does help change the, do you have cute pictures? Anyway, change how I think about it. I know I'm weird, but when I see the word collaborative with something, Wave Collaborative, is that like the Borg Collaborative? I'm just, just weird, science fiction kind of thing. But I do kind of like the Wave Collaborative is that we're going to work together and we're going to be building on a wave. So that's actually not bad. Not so big on synergy still. With the new, playing with the spelling of Nexus is kind of interesting. I don't know if I like NXUS or just Nexus, but that's a little harder to say. So NXUS is kind of interesting. So Nexus at Canyons or Nexus Works, anyway. So I like, in Confluence, I do wonder about it being confused with the point eventually when they build their part. If we were standalone and they weren't going to be anywhere around us, that would probably be my number one. So I'm probably narrowing it down to the Wave or Nexus. Nexus, yeah.
Dr. Robbins.
Okay, you go. Yeah, go ahead.
To give my input on what is presented there already, I do like that NXUS.
Yes, it's
for
kind of cool,
Nexus.
isn't
I think
it?
that's sort of cool. I think it would still need to have some kind of subtitle to it, Canyons Innovation Center, whatever it is.
Wouldn't know what it was.
The one question I have though is, will people be like, you guys are in education, do you not know how to spell? That's just my only concern with that. But, I like the Wave. I did like Confluence. I do agree it is a little bit more of a mouthful. Synergy is probably my least favorite of those four.
So I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate on this. So when you think about some of the most powerful brands in the world that have stood the test of time, a lot of them are more simple than they are complex. and that's for a reason, right? Yeah, and how people connect, I think Kirsten makes a really good point. It's not necessarily the name that is gonna create this brand. It's gonna be the people, the experience, the culture, how it feels when you go there. That will end up determining how this goes. I think in some ways, just, you know, being a former high school principal, when you think about branding, and I mean, from my background in sports, those names are usually a lot more simple than they are complex. And sometimes in that simplicity brings great power and strength. So just to throw that out there, I'm not leaning one way to any of them. I do like, I think the modifiers, you know, help with that. But I think it's also, you know, just to think about, you know, how does some of the more simple terms or names, you know, in the end, I mean, as a high school principal, what comes to my mind instantly is, or, you know, through a 17-year-old view and brain and lens, what's going to go out on TikTok and every meme that, you know, and so there might be something to think about when it comes to maybe less is more. I don't know.
Thank you. President Schill?
Okay, I don't know. I'm kind of like Amanda, where I like some of the ones Amanda said, like the synergy slips. I like that. I know people like we're really divided on this, so I'm a little worried with Nexus, to be honest, because it's similar. I'm sorry to say this in a public meeting, but sex. Like when I saw that, I just don't know what high school kids will do with that. But anyway, maybe I'm overthinking that. I do like the wave too. The thing about the wave or confluence, you guys, is we did have those students that have literally worked on the names for a year. I mean, think about that. And I feel like in a way we should honor their work, but I don't know. I mean, maybe we don't care about the fact, but I do feel a little bad if we just throw out the two names they put forward to us. But if we feel strongly, then we have to, you know, do what we think is best. And as far as what Katie said, I mean, I don't know. Canyons Innovation Center. If we really can't decide, I mean,
And I was gonna say,
there we go.
there's
I
nothing
don't know.
wrong with that.
So I'm not much help. But
CIC,
maybe
that's
even
about
today, if
the
we could
same.
narrow it
It's as
to
simple as
two,
it
I don't
gets.
know. Maybe we can decide.
That's why we said, why don't we just check that out?
Anyway, that's all I have for now. Thank you.
CIC is fine. And it says everything we want it to say.
Ms. Oaks?
She's walking somewhere with boats.
Okay, so one thought that I had, I shared this with the superintendent prior to this study session. I was with a group of college friends over the weekend, one of whom is a professor down at Snow College, and the other is a counselor at Wasatch Academy private school down there. And when they were asking me about the Innovation Center, and I was sharing with them the plans for it, they got so excited, and they said, "Oh, we're only 90 minutes away. We would totally bring students up back and forth for that." And I was like, wow. I mean, kind of like, it blew my mind. They said, we were looking for something like that. I really believe, here's my prediction, that this is going to cause a ripple effect throughout the state of Utah. When other districts see what it is we have created, they're going to have very little choice but to start and adapt and innovate themselves. And in some ways, we are the beginning of a wave. So there's kind of like, in that sense, I think the name could be really cool, because I do think is going to change education in the state of Utah. That's my prediction. But
Can I say one thing really quick? There's another name that I like. If we're gonna go toward the wave, what about Wave Point? Anyway, I just want to throw that out.
Ms. Dolly?
I think as we're talking about with the students, would it be worthwhile to send this back to our committee of students, even by email, and just see what their feelings are as we've narrowed it down to these items?
I like that idea. I think actually going forward, my suggestion would be so we know sort of how the students feel, right? They sort of coalesced around those two options, Synergy and Nexus. I mean, they haven't seen Confluence in the Wave, so we can take it back to them. We know how the administrators, right, we kind of did an informal straw poll of administrators that were in the room, and we know where they feel. We've surveyed parents, we've surveyed students. We asked initially just for naming ideas, not that to give us feedback on a naming suggestion. But I wonder if what we need to do is just some small focus groups, like maybe with some students, maybe with some business leaders. We've got that business advisory group, right, in the wings. Maybe with some faculty and staff, and just get qualitative data, not survey data, and bring that back to all of you so that you can get a sense how others are responding to the different names on the table.
Helpful.
And then maybe we bring that back to the steering committee, and the steering committee will maybe they'll have enough, right, to be able to say, okay, this is the one, and we can bring that to the full board. That's my hope. And maybe we need to bring more names to the table. I'm not opposed to that as well.
Ms. Nybar?
I agree with that. I think that's a great suggestion by Kirsten. I think we should take it back to the students, especially since they haven't seen some of these other options. I like that idea.
President Schill?
I would actually really like that idea. And what if we take it to our business, those business leaders too? Even if we just take it to one of the cohorts, we don't have to involve all of them, but what if we take it to one of them with these 4 names and get their feedback? I like that idea too.
True. Faculty and staff as well, or just the business and students? All 3? Okay. And then the next, do we want to do this in time for the next, when are the next 2 innovation steering committee meetings? There's one next week, right? Which is probably a little too soon for us.
Yeah, you can give it a couple weeks or even a month, right? We're not meeting in July, so.
Okay.
I guess we could bring it back that first August meeting unless there's some urgency.
No, I think that still gives us ample time to get, start working on the visualization in time for, some kind of a fall unveiling, and so that we can start to build the brand throughout the building as well. Because we want to give the architects and construction teams some heads up as well, so that they have time to do what they need to do. So, yeah, I think that's a good plan.
Okay, any opposition to that plan?
Seeing none.
Okay, any final comments before we move on? President Schill or Ms. Nybar, just speak up if you have any last closing comments, otherwise we'll move on.
Thank you.
Okay.
Holly, you're muted if you're talking.
Well, she was. She's gone. Sailing away. She's having fun. So.
All right, next on the agenda, we have item 8, which is our budget hearing. With you going down to the front, there's nobody over here.
Yeah, I guess I could switch it. Thank you, Vice President Edo. We'll go through our budget hearing right here. So we'll start by opening our hearing right now. We'll go over the budget, what the highlights of it. Allow public comment. I don't know if there's a whole lot here, but then you can have the discussion, and then we'll ask you to vote both on the revised budget for this current year that's just ending and our budget for next year, okay? So it'll be 2 different motions. I'm gonna go through this pretty quickly if it's all right. A lot of these slides I've shown you before. This is the budget that we've put online. It's on board docs. It's been out there since the end of May, which it had to be under state law for any public inspection. So I may show that. Also, once we get going, there's also page numbers where you can reference the budget here. But just quickly hitting the current year, the 24-25 budget, where we're asking you to change here, asking you to just move up our revenues and expenses by about a little over 1% for each. Some of the revenues, you know, we had unspent carryovers in land trust and TSSA, and also IDA and Title I funds that were not spent last year that we can carry forward and put in the budget this year. The reason our expenses go up is because we have some carryovers that, for schools, that we added back into the budget for, you know, supplies, textbooks, technology equipment. Also, our electricity has gone up some. And also have a fewer unfilled positions, you know, partly because our wages are up there higher. So we have people, you know, somewhat coming to us to work. So all that being said, not much of a change. And as we've always done the last several years, you know, we're looking at being under budget around 2% once everything's said and done. You can see our other funds there. Our capital funds, the main one that changed. Again, we spent $50 million on the Innovation Center that we didn't plan on a year ago at this time. And then also we had school carryovers there and equipment that got added back in. The other is pretty much consistent in the nutrition fund. That went up because we bought quite a bit of new equipment. We needed to spend down some of that balance. So we spent about $600,000 in equipment. Also, our food costs have gone up too, as well, as everybody has seen that at the store. So that's our budget, our revised budget for this past year that we're asking to approve. Here's our budget going forward. Again, the page numbers on the actual budget are shown on most of the screens where we got this data. Just accumulating it there. So you can see all our revenues, all our expenses. You see lots of deficits in that far right column. We'll go through that in just a moment. Keep in mind, again, we always budget heavy on the expenses, but try to get our revenues as close as we can, but go, you know, expect to be 2 to 3% under budget on our expense side. But we do have beginning balances or fund balances to start with that we figure into the budget as well. So again, when you look at the ending balances, we still looking to have an ending balance of 110 million once next year is complete in all our funds. A lot of that will be drawn down in our capital fund as we look to make some big ongoing items at Jordan High and the Innovation Center in particular. Just hitting our general fund, our revenues by source going around the blue. The blue is property taxes. That's our, you know, we get 40% from that. We get about 62% from the state. We're getting more and more restricted than unrestricted from the state, always a concern. Our federal has dropping because we don't have ESSERs anymore that way. So that's where our money coming in is coming from. Again, looking at the function or the purpose of the money going out. Again, we're education. We want as much money going to instruction as possible in that blue area. So that's our teachers, our assistants. You know, we want most of the money as much as we can going in the classroom. Facilities is our custodians. Also our utilities. You know, there's 10 million we pay in utilities every year. Going around, the staff would be the 32 hours. Also be our instructional coaches, our librarians. School admin is going up because we have hired 13 new elementary APs. And our student services are, you know, our counselors, social workers, psychologists. And then central's accounting, payroll, IT, transportation's our busing, and just a little bit there in district and community. So again, what the object is the detail. And of course, education, you can talk all you want about AI and everything. It's still a teacher in front of our kids. And that's what it's all about. And so it's people. That's why 90% of our budget is people expense in our general fund for salaries and benefits. Then the other for utilities and some supplies and whatnot. But again, it's always people. That's why negotiations are big in there. Our budget's made up of some 12,000 Excel lines. And just to, you know, give you a brief overview of what's included in here is you know, the state money we got, 4%, and they did give each teacher, you know, a $1,400 increase, but they also took away money, you know, to make it all balance in transportation, DTL, software grants, and other places as well. We are proposing another a tax increase in our general fund of about 4.1 million. Get to that towards the end here. The biggest one would be the negotiation agreements with all our association groups. And then, as I mentioned, adding the elementary APs. We kept class sizes the same in elementary and middle school. We did raise them by a half in the high school to help offset those elementary APs. We have a cushion of 29 teachers, still with about 10 remaining right now, if we needed those. And then we have increases in supplies, utilities. Teachers will still get paid their hourly rate. And again, mentioned that educator salary adjustment moving up. Here's the expenses. Here's how our balance looks. Again, we're budgeting on being over, being under budget, by about that 2-3% for our expenses. So we do feel like once everything is balanced out, we will come basically even with that in mind. Keep in mind, the last several years, the law allows us to move unspent money from our debt service fund into our general fund for any technology purposes, and we plan to keep doing that transfer as well. So at the end, we're showing a $62 million fund balance. We do expect that to be in the 70 range. We're at about 72 right now. We expect to be about that moving forward. Here's how it's classified. Again, the two big ones there are committed, which is what we've, the legislature allows us to set aside 5% of our budget for what they call stabilization. Then we also have money set aside for our retirees under our policy that came over from Jordan School District and open POs and whatnot. And the other is the assigned, that's school carryovers, building costs, insurance costs, things of that nature that we can assign money to there. So that's how, again, we do expect that to be higher, but that's what we're budgeting here for. A couple things that I just wanted to note. A big thing is our starting teacher salary. Again, so here's our salary, and I will call these our major competitors for teachers along the Wasatch Front. You can see where we stack up versus their starting salary for next year. So we have still maintained. I think we've even actually increased it a little bit. So big thank you to the school board for approving what you did in negotiations there. So still ahead of those around us, again, as we compete for teachers. Last 6 years, this would be about a $14,200 increase in our starting teacher pay. Our big concern that we have is our enrollments. We've talked about this at length and we'll continue to do so. Still just seeing that enrollment decrease, birth rate, housing costs, the main driving factor. We do have some proposals in the long range planning that we're working on that we'll bring to you later this summer and early fall. I put this one in. I just wanted to show you this one. A couple meetings ago, I showed you our out-of-district students. So those would be students who live in Canyons, who attend school in another district, or vice versa, live in, say, Granite or Jordan, but come to one of our schools. This is looking at charter school students. So in the middle one there, where it says charter school boundary students, those are students who live in Canyons boundary or Davis or Salt Lake's boundaries, but attend a charter school. It may not be a charter school within those boundaries. So for instance, we may have kids who live here but attend a charter in Granite or Jordan, but they do live in our boundaries. That's how part of the equalization tax is calculated. But you can see if you add the October 1 enrollment plus the kids who reside who attend charters but reside in our boundaries, you add those two numbers together, you can see the percent that, I'll call it somewhat of a capture rate that attend our schools. We're about 90%, which is better than our other neighbors. So you can see there. So that's a good thing for us. Again, we haven't been highly impacted since we started by charter schools, which is good. We have had some pop up, we know that, but overall, I don't think those numbers would change over the last several years by that much. So I just wanted to put that one out there. We're gonna move on to our capital fund. Again, we're looking at spending 72 million on buildings and remodelings. Here's some of the highlights. We went over this last meeting, or excuse me, 2 meetings ago. The Innovation Center, once we get going there, we'll begin heavy construction. Hopefully in September on maybe the outbuilding, then maybe in February, March on the interior side there. Just a timeline then. Then Jordan High would be the next big one with their field house and their secure vestibule and their interior theater, the little black box theater that we're building for them. So those we're looking at 14 million there. East Mountain Corner, we hope to have those done by the end of this calendar year in 2025, making good progress on both those. Some of the small capital things, we're moving underway on all these, the Indian Hills Band Room, teen centers at Brighton and Hillcrest. We got grants for both those, the Albion Auditorium, Jordan Valley Cheerleaders. So some of these will go into next school year. I know Indian Hills and Albion will probably go until October time frame to get those completed. And the Jordan Valley Chiller will probably go most of next year to get the controls all balanced out in the building there. We'll have money for district-wide improvements for plumbing, carpeting, electrical, 3.5 million for IT projects, and then another 2 million for school equipment. Here's our lease revenue bonds. The blue is the initial bonds we issued in 2021. That was for Glacier Hills and Peruvian Park. The red is for Jordan. We did about just over a year ago for Jordan Corner, Hillcrest, and Eastmont. And the kind of the turquoise would be the Innovation Center. You can see paying them all off in 2040. As of right now, we still owe about 124, and you can see what our payment will be next year. Again, keep in mind the budget does include a 2.5, almost a 2.6, if I round, tax increase to fund the bonds for the Innovation Center. Okay, so we'll get to that here in just a moment as well. Here, one of the things we always look at our capital fund is going out 3 years, seeing where our balance would be and how much we can do. So again, balance is still fairly on the low side, but we do have, 4.5 million for each year for complete the lease revenue bond payments, the ongoing district-wide capital maintenance, 4.5 million for ongoing maintenance, 5 million for small capital projects each year. So we can still do some good things, I think, to keep our schools going in the state till we can get to the point where we can start looking at rebuilding some new schools there. We'll talk about our debt fund. Here's our current debt. We just made our payment for 25 this past week. So once we're about 334 million in GO bonds, with the payment due this upcoming year, that will bring us down close to that 300 million mark there. So again, we're starting to try to get that a more rapid pay down. Again, and then here's it is in a graphical form. This is assuming we're still looking to refund bonds issued in 2015. I know you gave us your approval back a few months ago. We're still waiting for interest rates to even out for us. It looks like they will here in the next month, so we're looking to do that then. But once that's done, this is how we feel like this will look. It's nice that we'll have a rapid pay down that 67% is due within the next 6 years. And then, it does taper down quite a bit once the blue is paid off. That would be the 2010 bonds. So all bonds paid off in 13 years in 2038. You see the chart there. Nutrition, lunch prices remain the same. Our balance will be about 5 million at the end of next year. Again, those CEP schools, Midvale Middle, then Midvale, Mid-Valley, Copperview, East Midvale, and Sandy will still all receive free breakfast and lunch as they have this year. Other funds, I think the biggest is just that bottom one there, the self-insurance fund. health, insurance costs just continue to go up. And that's a big cost there. We're gonna cover 2.1 million in premiums on the district side, but employees will have about $850,000 increase in deductibles on their side. So splitting that cost of about 3 million increase in insurance cost next year. Okay, so now we're gonna talk about tax rates for this upcoming, what we're proposing for this upcoming year. We do not have the final tax rate set by the state, but they are getting close. So we're looking at, as I said, increasing the voted rate by 4.1 million and the rounding, and the capital rate by 2.6 million, again rounding. So you can see where the rates are there. Again, rates are fairly consistent, but again, values have gone up there. But that is what we are proposing, so it'd be a total of about $200 in revenue over last year. This is how an average tax statement would look. So this is for the average home. I want to just spend a few minutes with this. I told you last time I thought the average home would go up 3% or up to around 24,000. It went up about 5% up to 740,000. That is the average home in Canyon School District is that amount. So that's about a 5.3% increase or $37,000 from last year. You can see that in that green box there. Here is the top line is what we are proposing. It's about just under $70 on the average home in that tax increase there. Again, that top line, that's $69.60. So about 5.9% increase. Our debt stays pretty consistent. Again, the rate went down, but the values of the homes went up. So about a $5 increase there. And they have not, I want to emphasize, they have not set the state basic rate yet. That's the one we're waiting on. Again, that is showing about a $50 increase. I hope it's not that high once they set it. So we'll hope that brings that down. But everybody's home is going to change different. It's all going to change in how your value changed to the certified rate. So we could have homes that go up 7, 8, 10%, and their tax statement will look a lot different. We will have homes that go up 2 or 3%, and theirs will look different. Their tax increase will not be as much. Commercial, we've talked about commercial property continues to kind of, home values go up, but commercial property kind of stays stagnant. It's even, some places even went down. One of the big tax areas is over at the old mill center. A lot of those buildings actually went down in value this year. We have others along the State Street I-15 corridor that went up quite a bit, which, so it's all in how, the value of the property goes up as well. So, but that's what we're looking at. You can see it'd be a total, a total $140 if they don't change the they don't change the basic rate, but our share is that $70 on the top line there. So just to keep you aware of that. So that's what homeowners will get when they receive their tax notices. It will be around July 22nd. If they opt for that electronic notice, that's around July 10th. We will send you the final once they get the basic rate set and send you the final how this will look. But that top number of that $69.60, we don't expect to change. Again, that will generate us that I'm gonna go back here. That would generate us that $6 million, that $6.6 million right there, using this, using these rates. So. Here's just some little historical context. Since 2019, homes were, before the pandemic, 421,000, that's the average. You can see how much they've gone up, almost 76%. The tax rates took on down. The amount of taxes owed has gone up 34%. Some of that is because we have gone above the certified rate, and others is because Again, business, corporate values have gone down. That pushes more of the amount owed on to homeowners when they do that. Keep in mind, the certified tax rate does not allow for increases in inflation, so that's why we have to go out and raise taxes to cover that cost of inflation that we experience here. Just one of the reasons, I just put in a CPI chart. If we had $100 in 2018, that bought us a basket full of goods. That same $100 would, we could only get that same basket. We'd have to take out a quarter of the stuff in the basket now, because inflation has gone up 25% in that time. So that just, you can see our buying power has just decreased. We recognize that with homes, but that is the issue that local governments face. A couple slides that we'll show at our tax hearing is, if you don't feel like the value of your property is not correct, you should appeal it with the Board of Equalization at the county. That is due by the 25th. And if you're looking for tax relief, there are 6 programs there that help those over 65 or those with lower income, but you need to apply by September 2nd. I want to emphasize a couple things on our tax notice just before we wind up here. That we're proposing that to be on August 5th. That is when the county has asked us to have it. We will have it at 7 o'clock. In the past couple of years, we've had it at 6. Since we're not having a board meeting in July, we will have a board meeting before, but it will need to end about 6:45 because it has to end before this, 7 o'clock, as this is going to be the only topic on the agenda for the tax hearing. Also, a new law that was passed this past session is you have to allow some type of virtual option for your tax hearing. How that looks, we'll talk about that as a staff and talk about board leadership, or whether or not they can comment online or just view online. We'll talk about that, but you do have to allow a virtual option moving forward. So with that, I'll turn it back to you. Just want to give a big shout out to Danny for all his work, help putting this together. Again, those 12,000 lines of Excel, it's a lot. 400, again, we're about 500 million plus budget, so it's a big operation. So here's the 2 motions. We'll leave these up here, but the first one is to approve our revenues and expenses that will be shown you in the budget for this current year. Then adopt the budget for revenues and expenses on a tentative basis as presented. And then final approval will be at our tax hearing in August. Then we authorize to have a tax hearing on August 5th at 7 to set the following rates. And again, the voted rate would go up to generate 4.1 million. The capital rate would go up to generate just under 2.6 million. And the debt rate to service our debt there. So with that, let's see if there's any public comment. Vice President Nettle, I don't know if there is.
Okay, did anyone in the public wish to comment? Great, then I'll turn it over to the rest of the board if you have any questions, comments, or if you would like to make a motion. Ms. Oaks?
Thanks so much, Leon. One of the thoughts I have, you do a masterful job. By the way, I am convinced we have the best business administrator in the state, and
Don't say that.
it's true. And you're extraordinarily thorough, and I don't think that, like, even a penny gets paid by you, which is saying a lot. One of the thoughts I have with regard to this, and it has nothing to do with the budget itself, it's how we are presenting things. So at the pre-delegate assembly a week and a half ago, Senator Perucci and Representative Baldry were there. Or is it Senator Baldry? Is she a senator? She's a senator. They were both senators. Okay, excuse me, my mistake. They were there speaking with us and they made a very interesting comment that puzzled me. And that was, they said, we don't know why you guys keep raising taxes. They said, you know, here we're giving you all of this additional money, and yet you're going and raising property taxes, and what do you have to show for it? And where are you spending it? And I was really puzzled by that because I thought, we give them your book every year that accounts for all of the things. And when I started asking some questions after they spoke to get a better idea of where that perception was coming from, the feedback was that, and this is not necessarily our fault, right, because public education funding is very complex, but that it's the reports that we have are so complex and so thick that they don't know how to get through that and easily perceive what's going on, and so they just don't look at it, right? And I'm just wondering, and I'm glad we have Kirsten in the room, I'm wondering what we can do as a district to better inform our legislators about where the money is going in a way that is more simple and straightforward. I mean, of course, we're going to have some asterisks on there, like look at the fine print if you have additional questions, but they are inundated with so much information, even over the interim sessions, that I think we need to really develop, whether it's an infographic, but something that is more easily digestible for them and for also probably members of our public to get a snapshot idea of where it's going. And then on the other side of that, we need to do a better job actively communicating that with them and getting it to our legislators. I was blown away that was their perception. And it was like they weren't aware of the cost of the safety bill, and they weren't aware of what's happened as a result of school fees. I know that Murray School District sent that letter months ago trying to help them understand the death by 1,000 paper cuts that we're experiencing and why we're forced to pay property taxes. But I was shocked to hear people like that, especially now in leadership, that their perception is that we're just randomly raising taxes for no reason. I want to make it very clear to the public here, we don't feel like we have any other choice. If we're going to stay competitive with teacher salaries and keep up with the basic expenses, particularly the ones that have been compelled upon us by the legislature in recent years, we have very little choice in the matter. Am I saying that correctly, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's always that, how do you take these 12,000 Excel lines and
Right.
summarize it just in a few charts, graphs, a little, almost like a 3x5 card type thing, and so people can understand. And that's something I'll be honest, I struggle with how to present that. But yeah, that's it's a it's a three-legged stool that we're funded on. One is state money, one is property taxes, and one is fees. And so, and also keeping up with inflation. We've long advocated if they would have put in the certified rate an inflationary factor, that would help, which is, that is built into the gas tax, that is built into income tax, because as more people move here, as wages go up, they keep the rate the same, but they generate more money. They do not do that for property taxes, and so that's a tough thing to explain.
Well, and to that point, I mean, sometimes the ins and outs of the finances of this district better than anyone. I think even providing some talking points, I think, for our external relations team would be extraordinarily helpful. That same night that I'm mentioning, Alpine School District board members went and spoke with Senator Baldry and Perucci about the fact that Alpine School District has had to spend $11,000 on ammunition for the school safety and guardians, or whoever's going to be in those schools. And that kind of got their attention a little bit. Like they're like, well, wait a minute, what? And so this is what I'm saying. It's all conceptual for them, so we need to figure out a way how to effectively communicate some of these things.
President Shell?
So just kind of building on what Amanda said at that delegate assembly, yeah, I was shocked because they kind of acted like they didn't like us raising taxes, and I felt the same way. I was like, what do you expect us to do? Because we're at the point where if we're going to still maintain all of our programs, you know, all these programs that are super expensive, and the service level that we want to give to our parents, we have to raise taxes, right? We all know that. And also to take care of our teachers and employees. So I feel like just, yeah, exactly what Amanda said. We need to communicate that more broadly. And I'm wondering if we should actually invite leadership, you guys, because I do think leadership are the people who need to understand this. We could send them a letter. We could send them, if we come up with some easy slides. Like, I really like Leon's pie charts. I think those are really easy to understand. But let's talk about this further when we meet with our own legislators, because yeah, I was shocked that I don't think they realize how much money they cut out of our budgets. They really don't.
Yeah.
They really don't. And then of course they're raising the basic rate. I bet they don't even know they're raising the basic rate.
Yes, yeah.
I
They're
mean,
doing
they gave
this.
everyone the income tax cut,
Yeah.
but then they are raising property taxes.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm like pointing. Okay, but Leon, I wanted to see if I just wanted to point something out for the public or for anyone. I have been hearing rumors about like, oh, there's so much administration and there's just, you know, people are saying that again. So can you go to slide 12 where it's the general fund expenditures by function. So I don't know if you guys can pull that up.
Yeah, it's pulled up here.
Okay, great. I can't see that. But I just want to point out here that the central district office is 4.7%. That's how much of our budget is spent on Canyon's district administration. And I bet if you go to any company that is doing well, it's more than 4% that they are spending on their top administrators. So I just wanted to point that out. I mean, the other piece is school admin is, I think it's 7.5. It's kind of blurry on my screen.
Yeah,
Can't see that.
7.5.
Yeah, 7.5. So even that, I mean, of course, everyone knows how important a principal is, and now we're adding all these assistant principals to help out our principals. But I just wanted to point that out because I think it's just something out there that is not a true narrative. So that's all. And I want to say thank you to Leon and Danny for all their work. Yeah, it's amazing. You guys do great things with our budget. So thank you.
Ms. Pedersen?
Yes, thank you for all the extra work you guys have been doing for us. I just wanted to ask that it was brought up in USBA a while ago that there was going to be a spreadsheet created by every district to send to the legislators identifying the bill and then how much it costs to implement that for just this year's bills, which is a lot anyway. Has that come across your desk? Is that something we're working on?
Yeah, I filled that out probably back before the USBA, back in May, before
Okay.
the delegate assembly.
Is there a way we can get a copy of that as well?
Sure, I can send you
Because
the link.
I think they're compiling it into a document that they can hand to everyone. But I think it would be very helpful for us, again, with our talking points,
Yeah, just-
to be able to see what it is we're exactly, what our district is spending, because every district is different.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, we were negative, just like many others.
Of course you
so,
were.
Yeah.
that's not a surprise. This is supposed to be
Yeah.
informative to our legislators. So thank you
Yeah,
very
I'll
much.
send you that link, maybe by the end of the day. I'll try and send that out.
Ms. Dolly?
I was just gonna make a motion. Are we ready for that? Okay. I move to adopt the 2024-25 final budget for revenues and expenditures for each fund as presented.
Do we have a second?
I'll make that second.
All right, we have a motion and it has been seconded. Is there any discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? The motion passes.
I move to adopt the 2025-26 budget revenues and expenditures on a tentative basis for each fund as presented, as final approval will be at the Truth in Taxation hearing.
I also move. Did we, sorry.
Yeah, same
Same,
motion.
okay. And 2, authorize a truth in taxation hearing on August 5th at 7 p.m. to set the property tax rates as follows. A, basic school levy, certified rate as determined by the Tax Commission and Utah State Board of Education. B, voted levy, a rate to yield an additional $4,078,200 above the certified rate. These funds will be used for operational expenses, primarily increases to teachers and support staffs. C, capital levy, a rate to yield an additional $2,555,000 above the certified rate to fund lease revenue bond payments for Innovation Center. D, debt levy, sufficient to service debt requirements not to exceed 0.001565.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion and it's been seconded. Is there any discussion? With no discussion, we'll go ahead and take a vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion passes. All right, that brings us on to staff comments. So we'll start with Dr. Robbins.
Just real quick, thank you to everybody that went up to the Davis Dignity Symposium, Leadership Symposium. It was great again, and we had board members there as well as administrators. And Kyle Reyes was the keynote, the Vice President of Student Affairs at Utah Valley. He was awesome. And so just hopefully we can continue to support the symposium. I think it's been really helpful to the district. So thanks to everybody that went.
Mr. Wilcox.
Last time I mentioned a few administrators who were leaving us. I forgot to note one, and that was Nate Edelson, our great special ed. He's done so much for us over the last 4 or 5 years since he's been in that position, moving to Provo City School District. So wish Nate and his family the best as he moves on. But excited for Terry Mitchell and what she'll bring to us as well. But with that, just hope everybody is having a good summer so far. That's all I got.
All right, so we'll move on to board comments. Tonight, I was going to start with President Shell, but said she had no comments. I thought that was going to be really fun.
Dang.
So we'll go ahead and start with Mr. Lewis.
All right. I want to say I went to the symposium this last week. It was super awesome. Thank you for Davis School District for hosting that symposium. It was some great information. I'm very grateful to have been able to attend. I want to just condemn the acts of violence that this nation saw over this last weekend in Salt Lake City and in Minneapolis. Just a quick, simple condemnation. Political violence will not change the balance of power in Utah or anywhere else in this country. There are now children left without parents because of an act of grotesque violence. So let's just all try to be better going forward.
Ms. Oakes?
Thank you for that. I agree with you, Jackson. It's been really sobering. Okay, so there are a couple of things I got to do. I mentioned the pre-delegate assembly, which was a great experience. And also last week, Karen and I attended the BYU Arts Express conference that focuses on arts integration, particularly in K through 6, but also those principles extend beyond. That is always my favorite conference to attend every year. It's so joyful and it's incredible. I learn a lot. I learned so much about what it's like to be in the students' shoes for a minute and how vulnerable they are often, especially when they're being asked to create things. But there is something that I've come to realize over the last few months. In an effort to better understand design thinking and preparation for the Innovation Center and what we want to do there, I decided to look up the Stanford Design School and better understand what kind of opportunities there are for me to get engaged in design thinking, and I came across a couple of courses. They've been amazing. And what I've learned more than anything is that creativity is a muscle. It's a skill set. And it's not something that people are either born with or they're not. It's something that they develop and they practice and get better at. And sometimes you have to let go of your pride a little bit, but as you start to lean into it and work at it more and more and more, it's incredible what emerges. I feel very strongly that that process, the design thinking process and innovation, begins early, or it should begin early, and we see it a lot with our Beverly Taylor Sorensen teachers who receive a lot of additional training and expertise in knowing how to apply those principles and art mediums to the core subjects that the kids are learning. And it is an incredible experience and quite magical. And I just want to express my verbal and public support for that program. I think it makes a huge difference in the lives of so many of our students. I also would like to encourage all of us to kind of look a little bit deeper at design thinking if you have the opportunity, even if there's some articles, or maybe I'll share some of them with you guys. But those principles are really what lead to the entrepreneurship mindset and the ability to problem solve and work with project-based learning. It's amazing. That brings me to another subject, and I know this is to my right, the resident expert on AI. I used to kind of not fully appreciate how important it is. I'm leaning hard into it, Andrew. And I have to say, I have come full circle and have come to realize that the use of it can be highly creative, and it can be an extraordinarily powerful tool. In one of the podcasts I listened to, one of the foremost experts on AI and creativity, he's a professor, Jeremy Utley at Stanford, and he teaches in the D School as well. They actually surveyed over 31,000 leaders in Fortune 100, Fortune 500, like all sorts of companies around the world. And they got back an astounding statistic. 71% of those leaders said they would hire a less experienced candidate with AI aptitude over an experienced candidate without it. That's really sobering. And to me, it means that we have a profound responsibility to really figure this out and how to embed this early on in a way that's responsible and appropriate and ethical. I know that there are other districts that have started AI committees. I think we have one here somewhat at the district. I would personally like to see a report come forward on that and maybe discuss how much, how we as a district maybe flesh that out a bit and expand it a bit. Personally, I don't know if that falls under which strategic planning committee, maybe high quality learning. I don't know, but I'd be interested in knowing if my other board members have any appetite for that at all. But the more I'm digging deep into some of these principles, the more I'm realizing we need to teach these kids how to use this effectively as a tool. So,
Ms. Daly.
Thank you. Well, as Leon said, I've really been trying to take full advantage of my summer so far. But thank you, Leon, to you and your team for being a wise steward of our taxpayer funds and in providing the best education possible for our students. Also, just want to thank our staff across the district that are spending time sharpening their saws this summer and participating in continuing education, particularly all those staff members that helped put on the Learning Summit for our teachers. That was very well received and just help teachers be excited about what's coming for the next school year, which is really exciting just as they finish the school year and they're tired and maybe burned out a little bit, but to have that excitement for what they're looking forward to. So thank you for the time you're putting into your summer and preparing for the next school year. That some people say, oh, teachers have the whole summer off, but I know we have awesome teachers that are doing so much work in improving who they are as a educator and in preparing for their incoming students next year. So thank you for spending that time and doing that work.
Ms. Pedersen.
I'd like to build on what Mrs. Dolly just said, that it is truly the time of the year when teachers can have the time to really plan and integrate what they can do to make themselves better teachers and how they can help our students. So, yeah, teachers don't just lay around on the beach. They probably would like to, but they know the value of the training that they can get during the summer. So they'll take a few weeks off, but for the most part, they're working on their classes in their classrooms. And that's kind of true for us too. The work continues even as summer has begun. I'm just going to kind of list some of the things that I've been able to get to. USBA Delegate Assembly was phenomenal, partly because we were able to use technology to vote, which was so smooth and informative. I think that will help us move through well, it did. We finished an hour early because we weren't bogged down by dinosaur methods. So it was great. What I really loved about it for the first time is we had a panel of legislators that happened to come, and it was very insightful to hear what their points of view are for next year. What are their goals? Because they're in interim meetings now. They are planning what they're going to introduce as soon as the legislative session opens. So now is the time when they're making plans. So this is actually the best time to contact your legislator because they're not bogged down with actual meetings that they have to be with. So this is the very best time to contact and get to know your legislator and tell them how you feel about some of these topics that are floating around. So USBA Delegate Assembly was awesome. And then that night I was able to attend the Entrada High graduation and administer the oaths for them. The best part about Entrada High is that they are increasing numbers of students who have finally been able to get their degrees, despite all the obstacles that they face. And I think one of the cutest ones, or the funnest one, was that there was a daughter and a grandmother who graduated together. They walked together and they worked on this together, and it was just very touching to know that it meant that much to the grandmother to join her granddaughter. So that was, and she was so proud. She was so proud. It was great. I did go to the Art Express conference. It was amazing and fun. I haven't played with my art nearly as much as that. Made me wanted to go back and have a classroom. I'm going, I need to do a classroom. I have grandkids. That'll work. But what was really the amazing thing is watching these leaders show us all the different ways that without changing timing or instruction, they were touching concepts and integrating science, math, music, and art. And it was just seamlessly integrated, and all of them, they weren't coaches in the front at all. They were guides on the side, and they were letting us we got to be the kids. We got to had the opportunity to experience doing those things. And the bonding that we made, it was fun. By the second day, and we only had 2 fun days, but the second day, I actually saw people I felt connections with because of the activities that we had done together in class. And we only did that one time. So if our classrooms could get more of those skills interwoven and not silo everything we're teaching, here's reading, here's math, but mix those all through the day, the kids would be so motivated and the teachers would have so much fun. It was just an amazing process. So I really appreciate the hands-on model of learning. We need to loosen up the rules and give people a little more freedom to be creative. We need to do that. Put the joy back in school. Then I was able to go the next day to the Dignity Symposium from Davis District, and it's fascinating to me to see the things that they've been able to accomplish to make sure that when children feel discriminated against, that they have a process that they can speak up, and how the school is going to consistently and uniformly handle these problems. Discrimination comes in a lot of forms, and it's not just race. There's just all sorts of ways that people are discriminated against, and it was really fun to get some more tips and guidance from Davis District, who were required to change their program, and yet they're stepping up and saying, hey, we've learned from this, we enjoy this, we want to share this with you. So they invite districts from all over the state to come up for this symposium. And then, of course, we've had a few district committee meetings. one thing I did want to say about AI, just while I'm thinking about it, is that before we can teach the kids to use AI, I think we really need to work on teaching our teachers so that they feel comfortable, because you're right, this isn't something that we were taught anywhere in our training. Has anyone? We're all on the same learning curve, but I think one of the things that will take the stress out of education is letting the computer do the grunt work. And then you'll have time to do those creative, innovative, fun kinds of things. So we really need to focus on how can we do PD with our teachers so that they feel comfortable using it. And we're not saying that it's going to cheat. We're going to use them as it's meant to be, which is a tool and not a way around things. Let's see. And I do want to say, from all of the committee meetings that I've been on, that I really appreciate community input and how many times, I don't think the community understands how many times an email or a phone call or a conversation at the grocery store or formally, we get input from our communities, and that we actually take that information and talk about it. We share those ideas, and it's been very, very helpful. So I'm looking forward to, because I know we have some difficult conversations that we may have to have, but I'm kind of looking forward to working with our communities to talk about what are we going to do to strengthen our schools and use our money the most efficiently, be prudent in the way that we're applying our money. So I'm looking forward to the town halls that are going to happen after August. I mean, as soon as the summer's over, we're going to be hitting those and coming to the different communities in the fall months. And we want you to know that we are going to be discussing with you. Right now, we're just throwing around a bunch of ideas, and we need to hear some of your ideas as well. So I look forward to that. One of the reasons why we're waiting till that long is that we need to have our employees and our staff able to comment as well. They're off for the summer, and this impacts them as much as I didn't say they were off playing, but this impacts them as much as it does our parents and our community. So we need to make sure that all parties that are going to be impacted will be able to contribute to those conversations. So I'm kind of looking forward to being able to do that. And I hope that our communities are enjoying the summer and getting their rec passes so they can go swimming for free. That's, again, been offered by Salt Lake County. And that they're doing their 20 minutes of reading, right? No, yeah, 20 minutes reading, 10 minutes math. Let's see if we can keep that up so that we don't have our summer slide. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pedersen. President Schill.
Okay, after hearing everyone talk, I'm like, I gotta say something. Plus, we have a lot of time. We're really early tonight. So I was able to attend the delegate assembly, and I think for all of us that were there, it was just really interesting to hear the perspective of the legislators, because we have our own perspective, and I think sometimes we just don't realize what their shoes are like. And I do think it was very interesting, and I do think, just like we talked about earlier, that we need to communicate more, even more and better to them so they understand our side as well. The second thing is I was able to attend that Davis Dignity Symposium, and that was just really informative to me too. I wasn't able to go last year. And I am happy because just some of the stuff they were going over, I know that we are already implementing. Like, we've already done some of this work. The one thing that kind of stood out to me was that they said they try to educate parents all the time, parents, students, about the discipline and just their student handbook. And I would like us to kind of emphasize those things if we can too. I know we have it and you have to sign that you read it at registration, but I don't think parents really read it. I think they just cross that off. So that's something to think about. The second thing was I was able to go to the RSL game, I think, and several board members were there when they recognized our Teachers of the Year. And that was just really fun. The teachers were super excited. They were all wearing their Real jerseys that they were given, and that was just very generous of Real to do that. So I appreciate I appreciate them, and it was just fun to see their excitement and getting recognized. And the crowd did give them a good cheer and clapping. So then the last thing is I just want to also tell Nate Edvilson, like, thank you for all his work in special ed. He has been great, and I'm just sad that he's leaving. And I wish a district to the south would stop stealing our people. Anyway, we just have really good administrators, and so other districts do try, I mean, they do steal them from us, but anyway, we have great people. So that is all my comments. Thank you.
All right, I've got a couple things. First, thank you, Amanda and Karen, for speaking on AI. I absolutely think we need to focus on AI within our districts, both teachers and students. Similarly, I did submit proposals to teach AI for board members at both the USBA and NSBA conferences. So maybe those can come and we can have some actual AI classes with that. For my next one, I did prepare a statement, so I'm gonna read my statement that I have. I want to begin by offering my heartfelt condolences to the family of Arthur Falaza Afa Alu. Over the weekend, he was killed, shot by a safety volunteer while attending a public event in Salt Lake City. He was an innocent bystander. This was not a fluke. It was the predictable result of placing firearms into the hands of unqualified individuals under the banner of public safety, and it mirrors exactly the danger we are inviting into our schools. The Utah legislature mandated that every school have armed guardians. While they technically allow us to contract with law enforcement, they have provided zero funding to do so. When districts point out the cost of hiring real police officers, the only option that provides legitimate training and accountability, we are chastised for choosing the most expensive route. Instead, we're steered toward volunteers and low-cost contract security guards, many of whom lack the qualifications to serve in law enforcement. Let's be clear, the state knows these options are cheaper because they're less trained, and still, they insist we move forward, despite the risks, despite the warnings. The state's own school security chief has said he will not wait for law enforcement to ramp up. The program must be implemented now, even if it means placing unqualified, underprepared people as the first responders inside our schools. This is not caution, this is willful negligence, and it will get kids killed. Let me be absolutely clear. Hobbyists are not law enforcement. A veteran is not automatically a trained responder. Being skilled at a gun range does not mean you are prepared to make a split-second decision in a crowded hallway full of children. Active shooter incidents are chaotic, fast, and terrifying. In that chaos, it is not only possible, but likely that an untrained person will miss, and when they miss, a child will die. This isn't hypothetical. It already happened. The school guardian program is dangerously flawed. The legislature's decision to offload school safety onto unqualified volunteers and undertrained contract guards is reckless. Children will be shot. Kids will die. We must not wait for the tragedy to happen in our own district before we ask. I'm calling on the Utah legislature to immediately revise the law. School security must be the responsibility of trained law enforcement, not educators, not volunteers, and not the school district. I urge every parent, teacher, and community member listening tonight, contact your state legislatures, demand accountability, demand reform, because right now, the Guardian Law will not keep our children safe. It will put them directly in the line of fire. Well, that's kind of heavy to end on, but the board has finished its work, and I now adjourn the meeting.